And we return for the FIDE Chess.com Women's Speed Chess Championship. It's the second Grand Prix leg. Jennifer, yesterday was a really exciting day one. Do you have any predictions? And you made some yesterday. I wonder if they've changed for the second day, the quarterfinals of this bracket here as we pull it on screen. Any different predictions, or you're still going with your choices from yesterday?
Well, I think I need to see the very first game of the Anna Ushanina match versus Ho Yifan and then make my prediction, because yesterday was all about Ho Yifan getting into time pressure. She actually started 0-3, Robert, almost 0-4, but the legendary woman player who, has been over 2,600, 2,700. It's pretty incredible to see her here. And I think that it's going to be very good if she shows the type of form we know she's capable of. Now, she did win the match yesterday, right?
Right, right. So she's clearly, playing good chess when her internet connection is stable. So that's going to be the big question that Jennifer is hinting at. And it's actually a rematch of the 2013 Women's World Chess Championship between Anna Ushanina and Hu Yifan. And Yifan won that match handily, but this is online. It is blitz rather than a classical format, including bullet chess. So it is different, but I just want to, maybe get some of that little competitive juices flowing between these two players because they do have an extensive history. And yeah, I think that will be important. I'm taking Yifan. It's hard not to pick Ushanina. I have to admit that because she won the first leg of the Grand Prix. But when Yifan is playing in most tournaments, no matter who else is in it, you're going to, at least in my opinion, go for her. And especially now with just 8 players remaining, I feel like Yifan, she proved yesterday that she can play some great online speed chess. So I'm going with her.
All right. Well, I guess I'll have to go with Anna, but otherwise, prediction wise, these matches are all going to be very interesting. I went with the underdog in Lagno, and went for Abdumalik because I found out that she's a boxer. So I was very impressed by that. And also, Gunina, kind of hard to vote against, as she's just such a tremendous player. But I think any one of these matches could go to the absolute wire.
Yeah, I'm with you. And that was a great post-match interview we did have with Zhansaya Abdumalik, who, as you were just pointing out, she says she's been boxing for many years, which is really cool. And I just want to remind everybody of the format, how we got to where we are. Started off with 6 Swiss qualifier tournaments. The top 8 finishers in those qualifiers, they made it to a knockout stage. The top 2 there ended up making it their way into the Women's Speed Chess Championship. And the Grand Prix, which is where we are now, there's 21 participants, and they will play 3 of 4 tournaments. So as we pull up the graphic here for the Grand Prix, you'll see that they play 3 of the 4 tournaments. Some people are already on their second leg. Some of them have already been eliminated from their second leg, which means that their chances of making it to the super final are not particularly high. And there are 3 time segments: 30 minutes of 5+1, 30 of 3+1, and then 10 minutes of 1+1. And the breakdown for points and prizes is as such: 12 points for first and $3,000, 8 points for second, $2,000. Can't complain about any of that. And I mean, so far we have a clear leader in Anna Ushanina, but this is a really big day for her because if she can get through Oyifan, I mean, you look at the stakes here, she'll guarantee herself a minimum of 5 points in addition to the 12 points she had in the first leg. So Jennifer, this could actually, I wouldn't say qualify her for the super final necessarily. There's a whole third leg that she would have to play in, but this is a really big match.
Oh yeah, I think she has an excellent chance, as you say, in that super final. The two, if she does that, and the money that you mentioned, Robert, and just these great prizes, is the event being a partnership between Chess.com and FIDE. I just want to say how great it is, because obviously a lot of chess players are struggling now with some of the tournaments that would be scheduled not happening. So having this ability to make money online is just so important. And it's also sometimes the partner of the chess player. If they're not a chess player, they might not be making as much money this year because of interruptions. So it's just really sweet to see, isn't it?
For sure. And that's the prize breakdown is per Grand Prix leg, and there are 4 of them as we bring up the schedule here. We are in the midst of leg 2. It is July 2nd, last I checked. And so this is the quarterfinals. Tomorrow there will be the semis, and then there's a break on Saturday. Sunday will be the final. And actually, as you see on the schedule, it's the same format every single time. You have Wednesday being the round of 16. Thursday is the quarters. Friday is the semis. And then Sunday will be the third place match and the final every single week until we get to the super finals. So we know our participants today. We know it's leg 2, and we have just 8 women remaining. So I am super stoked for this. We'll probably have action taking place in just a couple minutes. And Vaishali versus Gunina. Jennifer, yesterday I was really set on Gunina, maybe just slightly impacted by her performance yesterday. She was quite impressive, and she was also impressive in the first leg in getting to the final. But when I slept on it, I'm still going with Gunina, but I think that actually benefits Vaishali. She has been the underdog in every match she's played, and yet she made it all the way to the semis of the first leg. And yesterday, she was really strong, showed great form. So maybe it's good for her that we are not choosing her to move on.
Yeah, because it's just about the commentator's curse. I mean, that's all that matters here, Robert. The fact that we're not choosing her is fantastic news. Now, I did see in our Twitch chat, hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Blake XOXO asks if there was ever a woman who was a super grandmaster. The answer is yes. Judith Polgar was in the top 10 players in the world. Since her, the closest woman to breaking that 2,700 plus barrier, kind of inching towards the super elite, would be Hou Yifan. I knew opening the show that she was close to 2,700. She never did quite get there. She was 2,686. But if she starts playing chess again, I think she achieved that rating very young, like age of 20. We can certainly expect her to pop over that barrier. But in blitz chess, with the internet that she's dealing with, she was not playing like 2,700 yesterday. It was just the time. And it'll be fun to see what she brings. I am tempted to just start with her because I think in some ways that has the most drama, Robert.
It certainly does, because from the very first move, we'll be able to see, is that a red bar on her internet connection? Wait, she's offline now? Oh, that's a problem. And you mentioned the commentator's curse. I don't want to talk about her internet connection, because yesterday I was cursing players left and right. I was like, oh gosh, there's going to be a knight fork there, and then the player would walk right into the knight fork. So I feel guilty. I feel a bit of shame. I'm hanging my head a little bit because I have cursed players left and right. And so I don't even want to talk about her internet stability. I'm just going to kind of peek. I'm going to close my eyes for now, then I'm going to peek and see if it's she's fully there.
No, don't worry, Robert. I am a poker player. I will tell you there's no actual thing as a commentator's curse. It's just observation effects. Don't worry. The same exact things are going to happen, whatever we say.
I hope so, because that is a good attempt to make me feel better. I'm not sure it's working just yet, because I'm sure we'll be commentating and I'll think to myself, should I mention that there could be a blunder if this happens? And I'll say it out loud. Oh, I should do that for everybody watching, all the spectators. And that exact blunder will happen. I'm like, maybe if I didn't mention it, the player wouldn't have fallen for that trap. So I think that the chat can blame me. I'm admitting to it. I'm open about it.
It is a blitz chess, and even in the 5-1 portion, you have to expect blunders. That is one of the reasons why blitz is such a great spectator sport. And the players, of course, live and die by them, and the fans are massively entertained. But where do you think the sweet spot is in terms of like the best form? Because I always feel like it's the first game can be really like jittery and the end of the day also, but it's like somewhere in the middle where you start to see the best chess.
Yeah, I think players, even if it's in the evening time for them, they need a little bit of time to wake up. And you play your first game, you dilly dally a little bit, and you just make a mistake because you're not fully just ready. You're not geared up. So I do think that towards the middle, but the problem in this format, and it's not a problem with the format, it's a problem for the players, that if they're waking up in the middle, you may already be down 2-3 games, and it's becoming very difficult to make a comeback. So you need to be alert from the very first game. Some players have barely faced a deficit, and others have roared back. I think of Valentina Gunina down 3-0 to June in the opening leg, and she stormed back and ended up winning that match. So I see the games are starting. I'll pull up Ifan's game, and I see
she's got 4 bars, guys. Yes.
Her internet for now is extremely stable. 4 bars. I'm sure she did something because yesterday that just gets you. Right? As a chess player, you want to focus only on the moves on the board. And if you're just constantly verifying that your internet is actually still connected, that's a struggle. So we have a London setup from Anna Ushanina. Jennifer, this is Anna Ushanina's just her weapon of choice. Wait, did you just see that, by the way? Knight b to d2, bishop e7, h3, bishop to d6. I think there might have been a mouse slip by Ifan. You don't play bishop e7 and then bishop d6 the next move.
So you mean she meant to play bishop d6 on move 6 and then got
Yes.
frustrated? Yeah, maybe. You know, and I was gonna say, okay, I switched my vote to Hou Yifan, but actually, you know, look at this blitz rating of Anna Ushanina, like 2,700 plus, one of the highest blitz ratings I think in the event. So she's obviously got some serious skills. So I'll stick with her, but I am very happy to see Hou Yifan with 4 bars.
Yeah, and I think Ifan, she hasn't played very much on this account, so her rating is one where if you ask Hikaru Nakamura, ask any of the top players and say, "Hey, you want to play a rated match with Ifan?" They're like, "No way, she's just gonna steal my rating because even a couple games taken from you, your rating dips quite a lot."
But Hikaru doesn't really care about things like blitz rating, Robert, right?
No. Nobody cares about their blitz rating online. No, that's not a thing that people worry about. No, certainly not. But yeah, this 2489, that's shocking to me. She should probably have her rating be something like, I don't know, I would say 2,800 on this server. So we will see if she is able to withstand what is going to be continued pressure from Anna Ushanina, who plays a very solid style. We see the position here with this pawn's A2, B2, C3. I always say this, Jennifer, a pawn 3 squares from a knight pretty much always dominates it. And this knight on C6 is nowhere to go because the pawn on C3 takes away its forward leaps. And with that being the case, the bishop on c2 is staring at the king side for a potential attack at some moment. I think that white has a little bit better control over the position. Not that there's anything of note here, nothing substantial, but I just slightly prefer white's flexibility with the minor pieces.
Yeah, it does seem very, very thin, though. I mean, yeah, there's that queenside majority to fall back on if everything gets traded. So the good news about this is that a lot of types of structures that you're used to seeing with this, there's a pawn on d4 so that it's the onus is on white to make something happen, right? Because we've got that weak pawn. Here, white doesn't have any weaknesses. So if somehow she doesn't get a checkmating attack or a big advantage, she's not worse. So it's there's less to lose in this position. And she did play queen e4 threatening queen h7 and queen h8 mate. Hou Yifan played g6, but this is a little bit of a weakness. And the move queen e3 is now looking, can I play queen h6, knight g5, h4, h5? These are the types of questions that she's hoping to ask. But there's just so few pieces left on the board that the odds of a kingside attack are not that high.
Yeah, you're sort of telegraphing your entire intentions, right? By going queen h6, it's clear you want to play knight to g5 next. Sometimes that works. You know, having tunnel vision, if it results in checkmate, you're happy about it. But here, after move like queen h6, black can even play queen to f8, offering the queen exchange. So Anna Ushanina actually plays queen d2 herself, not even allowing Ifan to think about using the d file. And if we see these trades, it's actually the queenside majority that is more useful. And the reason that is because if you just look, this is the extra pawn if you split the board in half for black on e6, but white's king and black's king are also closer to that. So you can blockade it a little bit more easily. Whereas if white is able to spring free and pass pawn on the queen side, it takes more time for black to just go all the way into the square like d7, c7. You just have to spend time doing so. And h4 was probably a good move to start with. Maybe there's king h2, king g3, king f4. It's not like white has to sit and do nothing either. I think that the position objectively, Jennifer, is level, but I prefer white's position.
Yeah. And you want to switch to the other game? I still kind of feel like there's, as you were describing that, there is a high chance this one will be a draw, as they also have 3 minutes each on the clock. So this is not one of these time scrambling games yet. While the other game is quite juicy, as Valentina Gunina has just sunk a knight into the f4 square. That's a really nice square for the knight, especially notice that pawn is on g4. So it will never be able to attack the knight. And so that's what we call an outpost square.
And that's an amazing outpost indeed. And I just did a quick count. Black is also up a pawn. So you have the outpost square, you're up a pawn. So what could possibly go wrong for Black, I think, is a big question. Well, after this move, knight c5, there are a bunch of knights attacking each other, and this knight on c5 attacks the bishop on d3. And if you take the knight on c5, after knight takes c5, b takes c5, maybe a semi-open b file could be useful in addition to the semi-open a file. I still think Black is much, much better here and can even start playing with like a5. But in the event of some of these trades, it does give White some hope of countering on the queen side. So actually, Gunina took on d4 and played b6. But Jennifer, what do you make of this pawn on a7, where it's an extra pawn, it's a potential pass pawn, but it's also potentially a backward pawn?
Yeah, gosh, well, I like the pawn. I learned well from Yasser. But wait, instead of knight takes d3, we have knight to a6 played. Somehow I was not expecting that move, because now what your point yet, see, I just almost called you yes. You asked me about a free pawn. What can I do? Knight c7 is a threat, right? With the idea that I'm forcing your rook off of the defense of the a7 pawn.
And wow, look at that precision by Gunina. She throws in knight e2 check, which was only possible with her bishop on d3, and then she takes on a6 and takes on d4. If she had taken on d4 right away, as you're pointing out, there's knight c7 stuff where eventually this a7 pawn could be in trouble. There'd also be rook d1 ideas. So she takes on a6 and then takes on d4, and now it's 2 extra pawns for Black. And you have to be careful, because there are threats from White to undermine some of the pawns, and eventual b5. To say your c6, your d5 configuration, one of them is going to be lost. So Black has to be a bit careful for the time being. Ultimately, though, Gunina is up 2 full pawns here, Jennifer. I think she is in good shape to take this one.
Yeah, really nice start to the match. And it also seems that time-wise, Vaishali is struggling in this game. And maybe that's good, because, if you're in a bad position, it means that she was maybe trying to struggle her way out of it. But I mean, this game is it's very promising sign for Valentina. Crushing in the position, ahead on time, Black pieces. So we'll have to see Vaishali come back and show some better stuff in the next game.
And of course, she's capable of that. And here, there still is some work cut out for Valentina Gunina, especially with this pawn on c6. It is a stuck pawn. That is actually just a great example of a backward pawn, because it protects these b5 and d5 pawns, but the b and d pawns can't protect it. It's stuck there and it can't move forward. So this knight on d4 is stuck in place, protecting the pawn on c6. And if White is able to create some kind of quick initiative, there are some chances. And after the move f4 here, she's trying to go f5. Not the end of the world. I think that the second rank being open is actually just bad for White. So a move like eventually rook a8 and then swinging both rooks onto the second rank is going to be devastating eventually. But I do like the effort from Vaishali.
Oh, yeah. And, yesterday she also had a slow start, Robert, didn't she? She was behind, I think, 4-2 and ended up winning the match. So I think it's a warm-up issue. Also, potentially in the even faster time controls, she can do even better. So obviously, I'm not going to count her out.
No, definitely not. And as you pointed out yesterday, she was in tough position. She ended up winning that match nonetheless. Showed great technique and speed in the bullet. And here in this first game, she's down how many pawns now? 3 pawns. That's a little bit too much, if you ask me. But there are in time scrambles, things can happen. But I think this move, king g7, now I won't even ask any questions, because once you bring the king out to g7, don't have to worry about any kind of checkmates. The king always has the h6 square to sit on. That I think that this is going to be quite a straightforward conversion for somebody as strong as Valentina Gunina.
Yeah, agreed. And this knight is just so. Oh, but look at this move, h6. What happens now? Oh, there's just king g6.
Right. It's like you can take it 2 different ways. Just don't do it.
Oh, but remember, what is that chess variant where you have to take every time your opponent offers you something?
Loser's chess?
Yeah, loser's chess. Exactly. Take chess, sometimes we call it.
Yeah.
And apparently in classical chess, sometimes it was considered that if you made a sacrifice, it would be rude not to accept it.
Oh, excuse me. I need to have the proper etiquette so that I lose this chess game. But it makes sense because I'm doing the right thing by the moral standards of the time. Yeah, it's pretty funny. I guess it was usually when the game was already decided, you would have to accept it just to show a checkmate. Like, where does that etiquette end? I guess. Like,
Yeah.
if somebody plays the King's Gambit, do I have to accept it every single time? Like, I have to accept the Gambit?
Yeah,
I don't know.
good point, Robert. So I guess like you kind of have to like stop. Um, yeah, you have to like incorporate that into your strategy, knowing that you were forced to accept a sacrifice. Like you'd have to avoid any sacrifices that are good if you had to take them. So definitely a weird type of chess game. But we are in the second game here, as it looks like Ho Yifan and Anna Ushanina are trading off into a draw. So that game we actually predicted correctly, and they're about to agree to a draw while Valentina and Vaishali are playing their second game. And what do we have here?
Yeah, I just showed the draw that's about to happen. There was a trade off all the pieces, and yeah, finally, I'm still worried about Ifan's internet connection. So if there's any sort of time scramble for her, I'm looking like, does she have 4 bars? And she does.
She still has
And
4 bars, yes. And there she is. Second game, E4, E5. What are we gonna get? What are we gonna get? A Petrov. Ooh.
and interesting that actually Ushanina went to E4, E5. I should point this out. She's played a heck of a lot of Caro Kann. So the fact that she's switching her opening on move 1, and the Caro Kann is E4, C6, and the point is to play D5 and have control of the center and recapture with a pawn on D5 if it's taken. So instead we saw E4, E5, and now we have 4 knights. And Anna Ushanina usually is very, very quick in the opening, and she's still playing rapidly at this point, but not instantly. And so I wonder what her decision making process was like and why she decided to go away from her very trusty Caro Kann.
Well, maybe she's going to come back to it in the faster time controls. But that said, I feel like this position that she's playing as black seems like a comfortable one to play in a blitz game. You know, it's a little symmetrical, right? It's a
Yeah.
little symmetrical. So why is white better here? Because I'm trying to suss out. It's almost exactly symmetrical if we play C6 here. So black plays C6, total symmetry, but black doesn't need to play C6. Maybe there's an even more useful move, Robert.
I think the reason why white is slightly preferred in this position, as is in many variations, is that because you moved first, when we get that symmetry, so let's say knight g3, if black plays c6, white plays d4, attacking something first. So we have the perfectly symmetrical. I don't know what this opening is. Oh, actually, it says the 4 knights game, double Spanish, symmetrical variation, 792. That's what chess.com is telling me the name of the variation. But here d4 comes, and now I'm attacking something. So you can try to play d5, but now you're initiating or responding to an initiation of a series of trades with a new offer of trades. And so I don't think that black can play d5 without some pretty severe consequences. So if that's the case, white gets control of more space earlier, and we have pawns on d4 and e4. So I think that is the reason why white is slightly better.
Yeah, well, the symmetrical variations in general, Robert, as this is something that, you know, a lot of youngsters try against higher rated players, they only work for so long because you can't go checkmate, checkmate.
That's a very good point. And if I put my bishop out and your bishop attacks my bishop, when I go bishop takes bishop, you no longer have a bishop to take my bishop back either. But it's a very good lesson. I think that when you get these openings, there are possibilities to be symmetrical for the first 10 moves of the game. But then when there's tension created, when pieces are under attack, you can't just continue following your opponent's lead, because that's how you suffer very early in an opening. So at this point, bishop e6 played. We've already seen the position change where it's going to be difficult for black to play d5. And already here, the rook's in f1 versus e8. We finally have some differences in distinction of the position. But let me ask you, Jennifer, let me throw this to you. Is that actually that much better for white at this point? Like, or is black totally okay considering there are no clear weaknesses to exploit?
Yeah, I think black's okay here. I like the way that Ushanina is playing this. I think that, you know, you got d4 in, but we've got pressure on the d4 pawn and the e pawn. Rook e1 actually played to kind of shore up the potential attacks on e4 later. And like queen c7 just played with the idea of rook d8. To me, it seems relatively balanced. I'm happy with this as black.
The one thing I would say about move like queen c7 is that I get a little bit worried, and maybe this is just my own insecurities that I need to work on. But the queen is away from the king side, so I'm looking at queen d2, which is a useful move regardless of if there's a bishop takes h6 or not. But I'm always looking for some kind of sacrifice on that side of the board because we do have many pieces for black, and that will help protect the king side. But I'm looking at knight f5. I'm looking at bishop takes h6. There are these very quick onslaughts that happen. And so black has to be extremely careful at this point in time, not to actually make a blunder that will be decisive.
That's a great point. And he actually did play the move queen d2. I feel like black, even though you mentioned earlier that d5 is harder to get in since d4 was played, I think that black at some point has to play the move d5 to kind of counter this pressure on the wing. And she played king h7 to just kind of put the kibosh on this idea of bishop takes h6, right? Because now pawn takes h6 and you're only going to get one pawn. That's not enough. But look at this, knight f5, and that's going to compel bishop takes f5, I think, because we can't allow bishop takes h6. That would just be, a brutal idea for white. If pawn h6, we would play queen h6 and mate you, and you just don't want to lose that h pawn. So bishop f5 indeed was played, and now the knight's gone back to f8. And how does white increase the attack now?
It's a good question. And I think that most people would be like, well, what did black just do? Like, why did I move my knight back to f8? And then they notice that there's a double pawn, not the end of the world for white, especially with its bishop on c2, protecting it. But how does white go from, hey, I have the two bishops, to actually something concrete? That's a difficult question. I would think about taking on e5 just to open up the d file, because if I don't open up the d file, maybe black will, well, now knight h2 is played. I was going to say e4 with a tempo, and then d5, like just advancing your pawns in the center of the board, keeping everything defended. Now I'm even looking at ideas with, if I take on d4 here with my pawn, how are you going to capture back? Because if you capture with the c pawn on d4, now you have an isolated pawn. And if you capture with the bishop on d4, you allow me to start trading some pieces, and I think black feels a lot safer with trades.
Knight d7 just played by Anna. Whew. I would like to play something like knight g4 threatening bishop h6. And if you play knight takes g4, pawn takes g4, and my pawn on f5 looks more imposing all of a sudden.
That looks actually really scary. And I mean, it's hard to play a move like e takes d4, but I really think that trading pieces was beneficial for black. And now you don't have these options, because after knight to g4, you're pointing out the h6 square is under attack. If you take h6, this is a big problem. I can go f6 check at some moment. I can go g5. I can try to move my king and get a rook to the h file and go after this h6 pawn. Black's king is in very iffy shape over there. And I actually think that right now, if Anna Ushanina isn't careful, we could see this game end in about 7 moves, because you can fall for some kind of tactic. And I don't think it's available quite yet, but I'm still looking at sacrifices on h6 and things of that nature.
And by the way, shout out to Elizabeth Pates in the chat, very strong player who also is doing a lot of streaming. I think she tried to qualify into this, right?
Yes, and she actually did a day of commentary with me. So
yes, I saw that as well. For the last one, you were working with Anna Kramling, but for some of the preliminary stages, is that what you mean?
Oh no, actually the first day of the last leg.
The first day,
Liz,
right? Got it. Yeah, awesome. And so f6 played now, and white. What does white do here? Let's see. I'm trying to like find ways to make like something like g5 work, but it looks like you're all set right here. You can take back with a pawn on h6, right?
Yeah. I mean, g5 is so tempting.
I know. I want to get my king. I want to get my rook to h1. Basically, I was thinking like king g2, rook h1, that kind of idea, and bishop takes h6.
That's coming. And by the way, Valentina Gunina won her 2nd straight game, so she's off to a fantastic start. And we will get to their match in a second. I just think this game is very interesting, and I think players, when they're under attack, they react only to the attack. And I still believe that Anna Ushanina should have captured in the center and try to break open the center. You can often defend your king by creating another attack on a different side of the board. That sounds very weird. Like, wait, you're not actually reacting. You're doing something proactive on a different flank or in the center. But that it diverts White's attention from strictly being on the king side to the center. And I mean, Jennifer, your move G5 that you mentioned, I'm still looking that way as that being a possibility. Rook to H1, just going straight after this pawn H6, also looks very strong to me. I'm worried that Black's king is going to be in some serious danger here, and I'm not quite sure that you have to play King G8. Is your king going to be able to run? I don't know if I believe in this, Jennifer.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is very scary that we're just attacking the H6 pawn and you can't actually defend it. So, she didn't have a choice except to run because Bishop H6 was a devastating threat with that king on H7. And it's funny that we had to play King H7 some moves ago to prevent you from taking on H6. And now we're running with the king. Question is now bishop takes H6, pawn takes H6, queen H6. Black has this nice saving move, queen G7, the fian kettle of the queen, stopping all of the funny business. So that's why Hou Yifan did not capture on H6 right away. She's going to prepare it by playing rook H2 first, then rook H1, and then try to sacrifice.
Yeah, this worries me if I am on Ushanina. I would love to put my knight on G5 and just close off your bishop, but even that doesn't tell the full story. There could be eventual F4, but knight H7, aiming for G5, makes a lot of sense to me. She starts at queen E7.
And here it is. I liked your idea, Robert. Rook H1. Okay, pawn takes D4. So even in this position, we have to look at bishop H6 right away. But she started with just recapturing on D4, and then queen B4 was played. Of course, Black would love to trade queens because then those doubled rooks on the H file would look pretty silly, right? They don't have a function if it's not mate.
Right, they're all in. You're clear that White is all in here, and bishop takes H6 is the next move. I would take on E3 right now. She does it. That's a very smart exchange sacrifice because now there's no more sacrifice on H6 without giving up a rook for a couple pawns. Now Black can I think Black's much better. I think that this was a great decision by Ushanina, but in mutual time trouble, I think it's either player's game, but rook E8, the moves come very naturally to Black.
Much better? Really? Wow. You think that, because how many pawns are there for the exchange?
0, and I don't need any.
Wow. Yeah. No, I mean, Ushanina played fantastically here to defend in that last little sequence. But it's shocking to me that the minor pieces could actually be better than the rooks with 0 pawns. What a concept. And apparently Hou Yifan agreed with you because he just gave one of them up.
And I think she's just trying to shelter her king. But even if objectively the position was about level, I'm pretty sure that both players were like, no, Black is doing well here because the ease of the moves. And now king F3, king F2, it seems like a position where perhaps Black can't make any progress. Although I would try to poke and prod queen A3 instead of queen A8. I would have like queen A3. Just even the threat is strong in the execution. There may not be anything concrete there, but I would be looking for it.
And look at this. They're shuffling pieces around. They're playing fantastic chess. 2 well-played draws in a row. They got down to their final seconds. Well, not really final seconds, last 8 seconds, which is kind of a lot of time in blitz. But the point is they both played really, really well, Robert. I mean, and that's why we're seeing 2 draws in a row. You don't see it that often in blitz chess, but these 2 draws were certainly not lifeless. They were just a product of 2 fantastic players.
Yes, and I think we should go to the other game. Before we do, I just don't know this variation because for the second time, she went bishop E7, and then after H3, played bishop to D6. So this is like the most complicated. I have no idea what this variation is, but why you stop on E7, and then after H3, then play bishop D6. That, to me, it seems like it can only be helpful for White, but this is some opening line that I will trust Yifan in because it just goes against many of the chess principles that we've learned. But
maybe it's because I'm trying to figure this out without checking any databases or anything. I'm wondering if after bishop E7, we're threatening knight H5, snagging the bishop clean, compelling you to play an early H3, which apparently Hou Yifan doesn't mind when you trade off bishops.
But that's the funny part is I got the first, we both understood that knight H5 is now a threat because there's no bishop G5.
Yeah.
But then we're kind of like, but why is having H3 bad for White? Like that's what I don't understand. Like in most variations, having H3 is good because when you castle kingside, your king has an escape. And if you castle queenside, you have a move like G4 right off the bat because your pawn's on H3.
Somebody help us in the chat. What's going on? I think that if Elizabeth is still here, she knows some things about the London. Maybe she can enlighten us. Almighty Buddha has his own theory. He says maybe she mouse slipped twice.
She's consistent in her slips. So let us go to the other matchup because we haven't given it as much attention. She bring the bishop back to D6. Okay, I can't look at this game anymore. Let's go to the Vaishali versus Gunina game because Vaishali with the white pieces, she really needs to strike. She is down 2 games to none. She has the white pieces. And wait, what? This is a weird pawn structure, double H pawns. What's the material count, Jennifer? Is it black up a pawn? Yeah, black's up a pawn.
Oh, wow, this one's wild. Yeah. Black's up a pawn. Oh, whoa. So yeah, that's 2-0 so far in this match. And knight takes c5 was just played. And now that's still just a pawn, but also looks like the f4 pawn is super weak as well. King d7, knight takes d4, bishop f4 is takeable.
Yes.
Is that a word? I think so.
Yeah, we'll use it. Capturable, takeable. These are chess words. Even if the dictionary doesn't have them, that's their fault, not ours. So you take the pawn, you steal it, you're up 1. But this game is going to be about king safety more so than the immediate quantity of pawns because the king on e2, not looking like it's in the greatest shape in the world. And the king on d7, if you get a rook d1, that king already has to start running. So I think that Gunina is doing a great job on the clock. She's well ahead, and she's spending time in this very critical moment because it's easy to go wrong. And rook h to d1, for example, could be a big problem. But she says, no, it's not a problem. My king can go to c8. Don't go to c7. Oh, there'll be a knight fork there. I'm saying it. I'm warning in advance. So if it happens, it is not my fault. Can we agree on that?
No, yeah, absolutely. Never. It's never your fault. Come on. Everything bad that happens is just the function of something somebody else did to you.
I think that's a great motto to live by. So,
especially when you lose a chess game, it's not your fault. It doesn't have anything to do with your moves. No. It's probably that your opponent was distracting you or your internet connection was bad. Some other reason. Seriously though, by the way, I want to give a shout out to Tayyip 999 because I think he's correct. The reason for that h3 being a weakness is not that h3 is a good move to have, but after bishop d6, it doesn't allow the response to bishop g3.
Right, that does make sense. So
yeah, that makes sense. We can go back to that later actually, but I agree that is a logical explanation.
Yeah, I still don't believe in it from a chess standpoint. I don't believe in Tayyip 999 because that's a good point. I'm just like, it feels so weird to me. I'll allow it. If Ifan's doing it, it's probably something that is sound. So knight f5 coming for this e7 pawn. I think Gunina can start with rook g2 check, and at the very least snag this pawn on b2. She's up 2 minutes on the clock, Jennifer. This is amazing by Gunina at this point.
2 minutes on the clock, already 2-0. I mean, she is just in beast mode. What can we say? Honestly, we didn't get as much attention to her yesterday as we could have. And a lot of the reason for that was, I think it was one of the matches where, it was just so dominant that the result was not as much in the air as some of the other matches, right? And unfortunately for Vaishali, it looks like that might be the case again.
And Gunina, when she is in form, like when she's in shape on the chessboard, she's actually pretty much unstoppable. She can beat any single player. And she does have this very tactical style, which can sometimes actually hurt her chances because there are times when you should play a little more calmly. And she likes to play chess that's giving both sides chances. And that's how I would frame it. So right now she's in great shape. She is ahead on the clock. She's up 2 games in the match. But this is not a game that you want to let go of because it's opposite colored bishops. And I can see a path going forward where maybe some pieces get traded. And here's rook d8 check. And you don't have enough material left to win the game, and then that frustrates you even if you are ahead in the match. So I think that she wants to win this game, secure her 3rd full point, and that way Vaishali doesn't even feel any sort of confidence to make a comeback.
That's right, and it is kind of incredible, Valentina Gunina. I mean, you're thinking about Karen's Cup, the London Super Final, where she just crushed everyone. And that was a mixed tournament. So she is an incredibly streaky player, but when that hot hand is playing the moves, you better watch out. And Vaishali could be in a very dangerous situation in this match if her form continues. So what's going on here? Is White getting any counterplay? Rook's coming to f8. I'm trying to see if there's any kind of little tricks here because it is two very, very sweet pass pawns.
They're definitely nice pass pawn. This king might get mated. Oh, rook a5 check would have picked. Rook a5
Oh,
picked up
yes.
that bishop there.
Yeah, that's a good point because the knight on d6, everybody, is defended by the bishop on h2. Maybe that was her hallucination. But here we go. Wait, what's going on?
It's about to be checkmate. So actually, it's funny because I also thought that it was a mistake, and the 5-minute portion is up, so they're about to cancel this game. But I had the same thing. I was like, wait, why? She could have won a piece, it looked like, with rook to a5 check, and the bishop does defend this knight back here. But instead played rook here, and the king was ensnared, and a5 was just a cheeky move, taking away the last square that king could have escaped to. And you note that the rest of them are under black's control. So this king here is in some big trouble. And after rook takes h7, bishop g1 check, your king has nowhere to go.
Wow, yeah, I didn't. That went so fast. I didn't quite conceptualize it. A5 is setting white up for a mating net in the middle of the board. That's freaking amazing. I love that, Robert. This is what we're talking about. She's finding these like beautiful study-like mates with seconds on her clock, and she had 45 seconds on the board. She's whatever. I saw it in half a second, so I'm just gonna play it right now. You just gotta love that confidence.
I do. And I'm going back over to the game between Ushanina and Yifan because it's possible we see our first decisive result. Black is down a pawn. Yifan is struggling here in an endgame. And I just saw the last move was knight to c4, which is a multi-purpose move. It defends the b2 square from any eventual, once the b file opens and kind of rook b2, but also protects the d6 square. And now rook d6 check is a devastating threat, picking off this knight on c6. So Yifan is down 30 plus seconds and is worse on the board here. Jennifer, your pick with Anu Ushanina, you stuck to her. It's looking like a pretty good selection thus far.
Well, yeah, I mean, she's playing great. I mean, that game where she was getting attacked, her ability to defend and save it, I thought was very impressive. That said, I am very hopeful that this will be a match that goes down to the wire. I just think they're both playing so well. And again, the 4 bars of Hou Yifan means that she's going to be a force to be reckoned with in the blitz and the bullet as well. Okay, so let's see how things have transpired. Rook to c8, king e4. Look at that king. Ooh, outpost king. I feel like that's an underrated concept, right? We always talk about the outpost knight, but the outpost king is pretty huge too, being unassailable on that e4 square.
Yeah, this is as good as it gets. Although I can get better in a second. What if you go rook d6 and king d5? So I was just saying you can't get any better than this, but king d5 is a good move. You're attacking the knight. Your king can't be put in check in any meaningful way. And then the e5 pawn looks like it's actually about to fall. So king d5 looks like a good aggressive move. And I think Anu Ushanina will play it.
Agree. That looks like a great move. Rook g6 instead was her choice. Now notice that you didn't have king f7 because there was a cheeky rook takes c6, rook c6, knight e5 check. I feel like we see so many little tactics like that in blitz chess. It's frustrating because, even like players who've seen it like a million times, have done so many puzzle rushes, seeing it instantly in the heat of the battle, you miss things like that, but not Hou Yifan. Knight d6 played, rook c7. This also looks quite dominating for white though, and now she's just pushing her c-pawn forward.
I'm trying to think how black can even have a semblance of hope here, because you're down a pawn. That c-pawn is the extra pawn, and it's starting to roll up the board. And you're kind of stuck. The king can't get out. The g7 pawn needs defense. So how would I try to make a draw for black? Like, what's my best chance? And I'm struggling to come up with any sort of play. Rook d7 can always move my pawn to c5. And that pawn will protect that knight, keep it planted on d6. So knight e7, probably with rook e8 mate.
Yeah, rook e8.
Oh! Ooh, a blind spot. The checkmate was, and the rook takes c4. This is the counterplay she needed, but she only was able to accomplish it because Ushanina missed the checkmate. She was playing too quickly.
Oh boy, yes. I'm shocked by that. Wow.
I think that players, when they're playing blitz chess and it starts turning into bullet, they start getting so worried about their clock that they don't realize that 35 seconds with a 1 second increment is actually quite a bit of time. And now this game, I don't think is winning objectively anymore, even if white still has the better chances because of this passed pawn.
What a miss. What a miss. And I love the way that, Robert, you are one of the few commentators who I've seen consistently talk about people using too little time. I feel like most of us, we only focus on the other side. And the reason I like that is because these are the best players in the world, best female players in the world.
Oh my
and
gosh.
It means that it's logical. But look at this. Wait.
She's winning. Yeah.
White's winning again.
And it's because Yvonne didn't have too much time. But
yeah.
I think the discussion is a worthy one to have. But right now,
yeah, we can hide on. Can we hide on h7?
You can, yes.
Yeah, I kind of like hiding on h7, and maybe she's gonna do that now. Yeah, that's a nice little hiding spot. And now rook b8, and queen, and
rook e6 is mate. Oh my gosh, no. That is the swindle of the century.
Wow. I did it. Oh my God, I said king h7. I love this hiding spot.
Oh my gosh.
What did we do?
That is absolutely devastating for Anna Ushanina. And okay, we need to take a moment. We will be going to break in a bit, but oh my gosh. So what is interesting about this is the black king would have loved to be on h7 itself, because then there's none of these, the king isn't getting out of check and I can keep my rook behind the pawn. The point is white's threat is if black does nothing, rook to b8 check, and you get a queen. And that's what happened in the game. But h5 was the most devious move because it is threatening rook h6 checkmate, which you don't think about because that was not even on your radar. And the best move for white is rook takes g7. Your rook still protects the pawn. Now there's no defense to the h6 square. And your next move is rook g8 and getting this queen.
So we just play rook g8. So rook g7, and then we play rook g8. All the same threats are in the position. Oh boy, what a sad finale for Anna Ushanina. I mean, just goes to show you always fight, you always look for these little tricks. I mean, it's mating net. Honestly, I've never seen anything like that, Robert. I never saw that mating net.
That is brilliant by Yvonne. I actually, this is something that almost anybody would fall for, because you have to train yourself to be aware that there may be a potential checkmate. Like, the king for white has been safe this whole time. It's black's king that was struggling, and then all of a sudden there's a one check, and that check actually is checkmate. So I don't blame Ushanina at all. It's devastating I really feel for her. It's happened to me plenty of times where I just don't see a checkmate coming, and then it's played and I'm like, oh, checkmate in one? How could you miss that? No, it's because it was never available until black played this brilliant last-ditch try here with h5, freeing the h6 square, understanding that the king is on the side of the board, and when the king's on the flank, it is victim to so many different checkmates. And Jennifer, I'm shocked right now.
I'm shocked as well, and I just think it's an extraordinarily beautiful idea by Hou Yifan. You know what it also reminds me of? It's almost like a advanced pre-move, because it's like a mental pre-move, right? Like, I don't think that Anna literally pre-moved rook b8 and a8, but like in her mind, it was like rook b8, a8, and I win, right? So this is advanced pre-move theory here by Hou Yifan, and she does take the lead in a match, and also a big psychological blow to her esteemed opponent.
And somewhere all these top hyper bullet players are smiling, because that was exactly what you were saying, just anticipating your opponent's plan, seeing that if they go for it and get a queen of all things, there's going to be a checkmate. Jennifer, I know I need a break. We will take one right now, and when we return, we'll get into the 3-minute plus 1 second increment of this FIDE Chess.com Women's Speed Chess Championship. Stay tuned, everybody. And we return on the heels of this really just crazy checkmate that happened. Now Hoifan is out to a one-game lead over Anu Ushanina. Ushanina has great chances to still stay in this match. She just needs to take her composure. I hope she used the break, Jennifer, because we know how hard it is. When you lose a chess game, and we were joking earlier about how you can blame everything else, there's only yourself to blame. So how do you think she can recover from that pretty devastating loss?
It's tough, but the good thing about blitz is you get so many more chances, and I think it's kind of relieving also that the next match she gets to play a 3-minute game. I mean, this is a tremendous player who was outplaying Hou Yifan, had her absolutely positionally squashed. So taking solace in that and trying to play a faster game is what she's going to do. Let's take a look at the game as it has begun, and it's another 4-night Spanish variation. But will we see that ultra symmetrical line that ultra symmetrical? That's kind of like a fake word, right? It's either symmetrical or it's not. Symmetrical for a long time.
I like it though. It was symmetrical for 10 moves, but here Ushinina plays bishop e7, and it's one of the things that players can do during their break. They can say, "Hey, let me look into some opening lines." I think, and even just think in your head, did I like the position I had in that other game? No, I didn't. So let me play bishop e7, which is a calmer move. And there's actually a common trick here, where if you play bishop c6, d takes c6, knight takes e5, thinking that you're winning a pawn for free, there's this knight takes e4 move. It's hard for people who haven't seen it before to play it, but the point is that their knight takes e4, this queen d4, hitting both knights on e4 and e5, and you can't protect both of them. So black regains the material and thus is happy to complete the development and eventually castle. So just pointing that out, white castles instead of winning a pawn, because it wasn't actually winning a pawn, and knight d4. What are we getting here, Jennifer? This is already looking like, to me, a position where white should have easier play.
Why do you say that?
This bishop on e7, I feel like, is about to get locked in once you play d6. That's kind of it's not a very long thought process, but that's what's happened, and I feel like white's pieces are just slightly better.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of times lines with bishop e7 aren't the most popular, and they're usually like sidelines because it is a weaker position for the bishop than getting it to c5, where it has aggressive potential. Bishop e6 played now. Anna will, as always, be playing for some kind of d5 break later on that'll rescue that bishop.
And we saw bishop to b3, the retreat. It's kind of like the London, except on the other side of the board, where if there's a bishop tree being offered, whoa, okay. So I am genuinely very confused, and I would love to ask Yifan and pick her brain about her decision making, and I think actually it's good decision making. But she took on e6, she went back, and then after c6, then she took on e6. So what the difference is between the pawn being on c7 and capturing on e6 right away? This is really subtle stuff, and I would love to pick her brain about it, because she's done it in the opening, she's done it now here in this position. Jennifer, it's really cool to see ideas like this.
It is, and a lot of people would be surprised why white didn't just take on e6 right away, because they're like, hey, you double their pawns, but it's actually not that easy to attack e6. And one of the things that this capture has done is it's also given black the nice f file and control over the f4 square. So it's not all pros for white. In fact, there are a lot of cons. So you actually don't see this trade that often. And sometimes people start to get overly comfortable thinking that it's not good to take on e6. So here we saw queen g4 played by Hou Yifan, and now knight to f4. When's the queen trade going to happen? Let's see,
maybe,
g3 played.
I was saying maybe now, because g3 is a great move. The queen still protects the pawn on h3, and so you can get away with g3. And if we trade on g4 after h6, g4, white's capturing towards the center and has more space. And I just want to say one thing, because I've been racking my brain about why this position could happen with the pawn on c7 instead of c6. And at first, I'm like, isn't the pawn better on c6 for black because you take away the b5 square from the knight? But I actually think it allows white to play b4 and then eventually b5 and try to chisel open the queen side. So I think that little one move difference of this pawn being on c6 sometimes can play to white's favor if you're able to crack open the position. I'm not positive about this. I don't want to act like I know for certain what her train of thought was, but I'm still I'm too laser focused on the difference between the pawn being on c6 and it being on c7. So I'm going to move on because I have to. Jennifer, we get to this position. You mentioned the double pawns. See, everyone thinks of them as a weakness. I would say here they are weak, right?
I agree. I think that the fact is that that F file is more prominent in the middle game, and with a lot of pieces being traded, it's not that easy for black to use it effectively. Whereas the weakness of the pawns are even easier to gang up on, as we see rook e2, defending f2, and now I just feel like that your minor pieces as black are so terrible.
Right.
The knight on g6 is just the worst. You mentioned it earlier. It's facing a pawn 3 squares away from it, and the bishop on d6 is stuck defending the e5 pawn.
Yeah, it's a position where there are no weaknesses to exploit in White's position, and you make a very good point about having the queens on the board. You can not just attack certain pawns or pieces, you can attack squares more easily. For example, this were a queen on f7. I would love to get my queen into f3. I can put my rook to f3, just doesn't feel very consequential. So I think that White is the side for choice at the moment, and I would play f3, I think, just to give my piece a little bit more space. She's not committing to this move. Like, I think Yifan is, she's just trying to keep all of her options open. And I mean, f3 doesn't take away options per se, but I wonder when or if she will indeed play that move. It just feels like a standard type of move.
I think they are going to end up seeing a time scramble in this game, as they are playing so well as we go down to 30 seconds on the clock. What a great match so far. Knight to b2 played. Now, it's understandable they're getting into time pressure. This is the first 3-minute game, right? So we saw a lot of situations like this with both of them playing excellent chess and continuing into excellent chess into the deep into the end game. But now, same situation, but take away 2 minutes.
And they have a draw by repetition because I guess black was so solid in the center that they ended up repeating moves. And I wonder actually if Yifan or Ushanina, if either side thought the other had a better or more promising position. I think White had to objectively be slightly better, but there was nothing concrete, no clear weaknesses to gang up on, no squares that were vulnerable to infiltration. So we see this bishop e7, bishop d6 line again. I would be so frustrated if I were Ushanina, unless she knows this line. I just am the one who's unaware of the theory here. But it's bothering me game after game that you can play bishop e7, White makes a useful looking move, and then your response is bishop d6. Jennifer, I've never seen an opening just like this one before.
It is pretty bizarre, isn't it? Yeah, but at the same time, look at the situation. I mean, black has plenty of development here. White's actually the one who's not castled. Although they did play rook to d1 to put pressure on that d file. So rook d1. Now, what do we do as black here? If we play takes on e4, it's opening up lines against our king and our queen. I don't know if I like that after knight takes e4.
Right.
So instead, she played rook to d8.
Yeah, and I mean, so sorry to interject there, but to me, it looks like White is fine, but is White actually better? And the thing that you mentioned earlier, like getting a knight to f4 could be devastating. And so knight h5, knight f4 comes to mind for me for black.
Yeah, good point. I love the idea of getting a knight onto f4, but look at this. Takes on d5, knight takes d5, also threatening knight to f4. So that idea lives. And White really, and that's actually one of the negatives of having this move h3 hand earlier, right? That if you have the pawn on h2, knight f4 is a little bit less juicy.
Right. There are not as many sacrifices. You can consider playing g3 yourself, but with the pawn h3, you're never playing g3 without dropping this pawn.
Now, you could even play knight f4 here, but no, you can't. Sorry. Because then knight d6, knight e2, bishop e2, and the knight on d6 is protected, and White would just be up a piece.
And that's a bullet mistake that happens all the time, where you're going very quickly through the tactics, but you don't really have time to spend figuring it all out. And so you make a move like knight f4 saying, hey, you attack my queen, and you take it, and then I take your queen with check, so I'm going to get your piece back. And then, oh no, the rook opens up and all is good there for White. So you have to move the queen, but if you move the queen, you lose the e5 pawn. So I think that Yifan has made a mistake in this opening.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's why I was hoping that knight f4 worked, because I was like, if I just go queen c7, you go knight c takes c5, and Okay, maybe knight f4 there can be looked at. So that's actually the tactic that hopefully Black will rest their chances on. But it seems like things are still hanging on for White. So we just want a pawn, and I think we'll live to tell the tale.
Yeah, this is quite an important pawn too. It's one in the center. Now the a2 pawn is under attack. Typically, it's hard to steal that pawn, but I'm just looking at that saying I'm down a pawn. I'm not happy about it. Can I eventually steal a2 back? And I think that there will be some variations where that pawn is hanging. I'm also looking at bishop takes h7 check because I see that this knight is undefended on f4, and I think you can get away with it. Like bishop h7, king h7, queen e4 check. And normally you'd play knight to g6 to retreat, but I can capture, and your pawn on f7 is overloaded, uh, protecting the g6 square and the e6 square, so you likely will just drop your bishop here. So I think that bishop h7 check is possible, and I assume she's calculating it right now, trying to figure it out, and I think she's going to go for it.
Oh, and if Anna wins this game, it'll be tied up. What a match this could shape up to be. And there it is. Bishop takes h7 check.
Yeah. And honestly, a tied match feels appropriate because the one game that Yifan won was one where she was on the worst side of things. And she found that checkmate with mere seconds on both players' clocks. So bishop h7, I think you have to take it. There's no way that you can just ignore it, at least not one that I see, because the queen is coming to e4 whether you take on h7 or not. So you might as well steal the piece that's there.
Yes, you're absolutely right about that. It's funny how sometimes bishop h7 check, people are scared of taking the bishop. They think they can survive with king h8. It's like, no, you're not going to survive with the same kingside weaknesses, but also not up any material. So yeah, take it and try to live to say something. So king h7, queen e4, king g8, queen takes f4. What's the situation there? White's up 2 pawns.
But maybe so we'll see this. I think we're gonna see this variation. And king g8, queen takes f4, and then there's bishop takes a2, perhaps. I don't know if it's good. It doesn't look very good to me, but you have to do it. Maybe f6 first, actually. But she takes on a2. The point is that she's down 2 pawns. If she does nothing, she's going to lose the game. Down 2 full pawns. So even if this does lose and the bishop gets trapped or something like that, it's the best opportunity given terrible options. So I think that actually she's doing okay for now. But the worst part about it is her time. Like she's down so much on the clock here.
Yeah, understandable. She was in such a difficult position. Now, rook to e8 played. I'm trying to see about discovery. So you note that if we take on c6, your queen on c7 is in capture. Is there any good? Not really. No, knight c6 was played, but queen g3, there's no knight e7 check in between move because of rook takes e7. And yet at the end, white's up a pawn.
Right. And it's just one pawn. So if there's a rook endgame, for instance, if I take on f3 at some point, it is only one pawn. There are some chances, but knight to d4 says, nope, don't even think about it. I can play b4 now, and that is a great knight sitting in the center of the board. The pawn on b4 stops a5, stops c5. I'll eventually put my rook to a1. And importantly, there are no squares to infiltrate on. E3, e2, e1, all under white's control. So black is, even though the rook's in an open file on e7, it's actually sitting passively defending a7 and probably have to defend c6 in the near future as well.
Yeah, and she had such a great position the last time she was white too. Can she make it happen this time?
Yeah, I'm getting a little bit of deja vu concern where it feels like a position. She's up a pawn. That's what she was doing. She was working that advantage, and then the blunder happened. Here's the h pawn.
Oh, but I like this h pawn. That h pawn coming to h5, giving you another thing to worry about. That whole principle of weaknesses, right? So actually, you potentially have 3 weaknesses in this position: the pawn on c6, the pawn on a7, and the fact that you have to deal with the h pawn.
You do indeed, and I think that it should be, especially considering that she's up on time. I think it should be a smooth conversion for Anu Shanina. She actually take on g5 as well if she wants to steal material. But I do like the principle of an outside pass pawn. So h5 is one that she probably should have played earlier, but still works out. Her king's getting to f4. Everything is working perfectly for white here.
Yeah, it's a really nice one. And it's a really nice position and a really nice idea that I think sometimes people overlook, making that outside pass pawn, which is the simple g3 and h4. Okay, but look at, okay, so now she's forging ahead with h6, and actually black just lost on time. Nice performance there by Anna. And it's funny you asked, how is she going to come back? Well, she did a great job showing us, winning a nice game with white after a solid draw with black. And now we've got a tied match.
And Ifan, she spent a minute on move like 16, and then at 56 seconds, if I'm remembering correctly, on move 18. And she actually blundered a pawn in that process. So she should have spent time before she got into this problematic position. And that's not me sitting here and being like, oh, like how could she not spend more time and think? It's just that the players get into this mental situation where now they're in a quicker time control, and it's 2 minutes off the clock. We had 5 minute plus 1 second increment. Now we're 3 minute plus 1 second increment, and they're moving at lightning speed, even though they do have time to calculate certain things. So it's funny how that happens to us when we switch formats, and it's not like the next day. It's you get a 5 minute break, and then boom, next format, and you just in your head, it's hard to, I think, know exactly where you should allot your time or not. So I mean, maybe I'm wrong, Jennifer, but I think that's a really difficult thing to adjust to.
Absolutely. And by the way, we should give a look over at the Valentina Gunina and a Vaishali match. It's not pretty for the young Indian player, though, I have to tell you, Robert. Valentina is just in such great form, and she's up 4-0.
She's up 4-0, and I just pulled up the board here. Gunina with the black pieces. How many pawns is she up? She's up 2 pawns at the moment, and white's king looks less safe to me than black's king does. So it looks like it's just going to be another game that Valentina Gunina should take here.
Yeah, and she's also up 50 seconds on the clock. 1 minute, seconds. Let's see how she does it, though. Always these aggressive positions. I'm anxious to go after that h3 pawn, but do note that queen h3 fails to rook to h2, pinning the king. So
yeah, that would be a blunder that Gunina could make if she was the one with 3 seconds left. But look at her. She's using her time. She's smart. It was rook to f8 and rook g2. You may have to make some kind of quick move, but trading pieces should help black convert this position.
And now rook f8, and the problem is there's also that f1 square, right, that she's going after. So if we get a situation where we can go queen h3 and rook f1, then we are going to be winning. And here I think it is, right? Queen h3, rook h2, rook f1. But maybe that didn't work. She just played queen f6 right away.
I think it did work, but she was so concerned about that pin that was there for several moves that you just ingrain it in your mind and you don't challenge it. And that happens in all time controls, that you just see it doesn't work once, and so you kind of forget about it. And she is in a position where now she's up 2 pawns, but her king is in some trouble. She has to be careful.
Oh, right. Rook e8, rook f8, bishop h7 check. We do have king f7.
Yes.
And it's not going to be a draw because we have c2 at the end, huh?
Yeah, there would be drawing mechanism if not for this past c pawn. So actually, this Vaishali, though, with great defense, she does this all the time. Take on c2, take on c6. She's probably objectively lost, and she's down a piece for just 1 pawn, but she's giving herself the best chance possible, and she's done this in many games.
Yeah, I would have expected black to have won this many moves ago. But I think she's going to win anyway.
I think she will, but Vaishali is never going down. She's never losing a game without a serious fight. And she has this A pawn. She's trying to distract black's pieces to that A pawn, and rook b7, good. Actually, this is already a tough position for Gunina.
You're right, Robert. I mean, I didn't expect this because I thought that with the time situation, but Vaishali's also made up some of her time on the clock, as it's now 7 seconds to 2 seconds. Pretty recently, it was 55 seconds to 2 seconds.
And look at this. White is going to go king b8 next move, get a queen. Black will have to sacrifice her rook for that pawn. And Vaishali just survived this game.
Nice. Well done. Her first point on the board is going to be, Robert.
Well, I mean,
not point. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I was going to say, I don't want to speak too soon because rook versus knight, for instance, the rook can win sometimes. But I don't think this is one of those positions, especially because you have this pawn on g4. It helps make your life even better.
You're right, though. Mouse flips and whatnot are definitely possible. And now it's Valentina, who is down on the time. But wow, what a great save by Vaishali. It just, especially with so little time on her clock, it's really quite impressive.
Yeah, I think most players would have lost this game, but it comes up with these tricky moves, and she made Gunina's life as difficult as possible, and she has earned just clawing her way back in this game, this half point.
And yeah, it's not gonna save her in the match most likely, Robert. But you know, as commentators, I think we both have the slight bias towards hoping that the player who's getting crushed gets some points in there. You know, it's just, you know, everybody in this tournament is so good at chess and has worked so hard in the game. I just never like to see somebody on the big stage and losing most of their games.
For sure.
I'm too nice. I guess some people do like it. They're bloodthirsty, but me, no, I'm always rooting for the person with fewer points. Unless it's like a good friend or something like that. So let's move into the Hou Yifan game right now, because this is as tight as can be, 2.5, 2.5. And my first impression is I like Black's position. It's equal material, but she just got this knight into c4, and it's another case of minor pieces. Which one's better? The bishop's coming to d4. Yeah, oh, I can't play bishop d4, huh? Because of knight c5.
I was about to say you have to be careful just for that move not to do so, but Ushanina recognized that there was a problem on the d file. Now this knight on d3 is kind of pinned, but I actually like the long-term chances of this endgame for white. Right now, I prefer Black's position, but I like the fact that knight is on a d3, the rook's on e4. You see the coordination on light squares, and that makes it very difficult for Black, especially with 12 seconds left, to figure out what to do, as white has control over an entire color complex, and of course Black has control over the dark squares. But at the moment, at least, it feels like white's position should be preferable.
Yeah. Yeah, we've seen a lot of good knights in this event, haven't we? Rook c4 played, tactical possibilities here with knight takes b4 if you would move the bishop away. But it's also, the clock is also a factor. Not that easy to figure out how to win this with 14 seconds.
She's going to play knight f2. She's going to trade one pair of rooks off, take on d5, and then put her knight back on d3. This actually helps her a lot, because now the other rook, this rook can go to c4, for instance. Oh, now it can't, but it can try to go c4, and there's no second rook to go to e8. So, oh, king into the fire. She wins the c5 pawn.
She wins the c5 pawn. We win the c2 pawn, but you win b4.
Oh my gosh!
Right on there, and now Anna fighting back with that h pawn, but it is 2 against 1. It is a problem. Oh no, that b pawn is going fast.
And the rook for white is preventing the pawn's promotion. The black rook has to go to b1, but the king. It's all about the king in the end game. And here the king is actually helping white promote the pawn. And this is just now. There's no checkmate. Just look out for checkmates. None exist. And so you can queen and win this game for Yifan. And wow, that was moving her king into a discovered check. That's something that a lot of people would struggle with, especially in time trouble. But Yifan, when she did it, she was just like, not a big deal. And I'll pull up the game very quickly just to show that moment one more time, because I think it is very instructive. King to d3 is a move that most people would not play, because you're walking your king into the line of a rook, but all of your pieces are on light squares except for your knight on f4, which is protected. So king d3, she gets away with it. And then the king ran out to c4 and started gobbling stuff up. So a 1 point lead for Yifan, thanks to her king march. And now she gets the black pieces.
Now, by the way, Robert, another cool thing about that endgame was it was actually like the mirror image of the crazy one that Hou Yifan saved. So she makes a queen and wins the game. When Anna made a queen after a beautiful positional performance, she got mated. So, I mean, the difference in those two games could tell the story of the match.
Yeah, because it's a 1 point lead right now for Yifan. And if she had lost the game, which by all objective measures, she was completely, utterly lost before delivering the checkmate, that this would be in Ushanina's favor. So this is actually, it's critical. That game is likely going to be the decider in this match, unless, of course, Ushanina wins, in which case, hey, I would have won by 2 points instead of 1. But I played a great match. So here, white's position to me looks excellent. You have castled your king. You have a good center. I would try to play d5. I don't know if it works right now, but I'm trying to open up the position against a king on e8 that's stuck in the center.
Wow, this is going to be a really interesting game. All right, b4 played. I was also just briefly looking at the other game as well, but I think with this match being so close, it makes sense to just pay a lot of attention to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I kind of have that idea as well, where I'm looking at the corner of my eye, then I see Vaishali's down to 25 seconds to Gunina's 2+ minutes, and it just makes me concerned, even without looking at the position, what's going on there with the match.
And there's the 4.5 half score as well. So yeah. Anyway, Queen C2 played now by Anna, and we get this break in D5. With the idea that after a pawn takes d5, we can take with the bishop. That's important. We don't want to take with the pawn and leave our bishop on b7 dead.
Yeah. That would actually, that's one of those moves that look like not irrelevant, but just like, whatever, I took with my pawn back. Usually when you get your pawn protects a pawn, you capture back with that pawn. But actually would be strategically almost a losing decision on the spot if to take on d5, take with the pawn, because your bishop becomes a pawn. And you certainly don't want that. And
no, and that's where people make most mistakes, Robert. When I go over students' games, it's always in the captures. And not just tactics, but also strategic errors, because those are the parts of the games that are most salient to the result and the structure and the dynamics and the position. So take your time when you have choices of captures.
Yeah, because these terms are quite vague, right? Where like, a weak piece. Sometimes you can clearly see when a piece is weak, but then other times like, it looks fine. You can't attack me. It's just hanging out. But then you talk about the squares and the control of a file, and these terms are not as easy to comprehend, especially for newer players. And so, like knight c6, like, why is that a good move? Wait, we're going to get opposite colored bishops. Who's that good for? Trying to figure out who opposite colored bishop positions are good for is not an easy task. And I say that knowing that it is hard for many people. And I think that black probably is at some point forced to take this knight on c6. Actually, right now, maybe, because of queen d7, I would just take on d5, because if you take back with a pawn, now look at your bishop. I'll move my knight back to e5 and say your bishop stinks over here. So it's a really clever move, knight c6, and there was a trade, and don't get checkmated. That's my first piece of advice to you, is don't get checkmated. But Jennifer, what do you make of these changes here with the opposite colored bishops now?
Well, I definitely think white's better. I mean, because not only do we have this possibility of maybe one day playing for like h4, h5, but we've also got a weakness on the other side of the board, that a6 pawn. We mentioned this previously, this principle of multiple weaknesses, especially important in this opposite colored situation, where if we can attack things on both sides of the board, we can maybe stretch you a little thin. And now we just move b5. And okay, so we're not going to win the pawn on a6, but on the other hand, now we have this pass pawn on a5.
And there's actually a really instructive moment where I'm with you that maybe going after the pawn was also possible, but she's just claiming, hey, wait a sec, I have an outside pass pawn and your pawn on c7. Like, think about where the extra pawns are for each side, because it's not a symmetrical pawn structure. Here's a clear pass pawn on the a file, and for black, your c pawn is stop on my d pawn, and your e pawn is also stop on my d pawn. So this one pawn on d4 is doing the hero's work. It's stopping both pawns. I think that you have to play a move like c5 just to open up the position for your remaining pieces, because the side with less control of the board is often the side that wants to initiate trades, as it frees up squares for the remaining pieces. And bishop a3, I would not even consider that move. It doesn't mean it's a bad move, but I'm just like, whoa, wait, what's that? What's the bishop doing here? Is it cutting off the rook's protection, the a5 pawn? Is that the major point here? I wasn't expecting it.
Yeah, bishop to a3. That is definitely a bolt from the blue, as but not really a bolt. More just like a move that isn't that scary. Queen e3 though. I love this move. Oh boy, this is a great move. Queen e3, because it attacks h6, but it does something else too. It puts pressure on a3. So now you also have to watch out for like bishop g6, or after the move rook a8, bishop e4. What about bishop e4?
I think she's going to either way. She's going to rook takes a5. Like, she's saying, I'm giving up my pawn on the king side, but this looks dangerous for the black king. And this actually is another great illustration of opposite colored bishops. What is that dynamic like? The side with the safer king is the side that actually enjoys having the opposite colored bishops most often, because I can attack you in the light squares and you cannot fend them off with your dark square bishop. But queen g5 was a great move, by the way, by Yifan.
Oh yeah, you always want to know, when is it good to trade queens? That's such an important chess skill. And of course, Ho Yifan knows that she's dying to trade queens here, as Anna's king is way safer, and also the endgame will have a very large tendency towards a draw in the opposite bishops.
That's right. And actually, we see some trades here. And with these trades, I don't think you can attack with just a bishop and a queen versus a bishop and a queen. So here, I think that we are going to see this game result in a draw, most likely, unless there's some kind of unexpected blunder. But here, Both kings are relatively safe. Just make sure you protect f2. Don't blunder on a square like that. So I think we'll just see them shuffle back and forth and make a draw.
Great defense by Ho Yifan. I mean, honestly, the number of draws in this match are actually indicative of how high quality it is, because there's a lot of games where they're both like just playing really well, and then in the end there's a perpetual or a standstill. It's very rare for a blitz match, and I can't wait to see how the last few games of that match end up. But let's tune in to Valentina and Vaishali. We have seen Vaishali get on the scoreboard. We are watching when it happened, but will she get a win in this match? I'm taking a look at this position. It almost looks like some kind of Sicilian, but I'm seeing Chess.com telling me that it's a Carol Khan defense, and it's the Tal variation. And I gotta say, I think we maybe are going to be good luck charms for Vaishali, because it looks very promising for white. And I mean, that h7 pawn is right in capture. So after we play a4, queen b4, rook b1, both b7 and h7 are both up for grabs. Wait, what happened?
Wait, where did Valentina's queen just go? I was like, wait, I was agreeing with you, nodding my head, kind of like looking, and then queen takes a4, just blundering her queen. And Gunina, she's had an amazing day, so you don't want to harp on her blunder there, but yeah, that was surprising, because now Vaishali for sure is going to take this final game of the 3+1, and she'll be now 4 games going into the bullet. It's probably too little too late, Jennifer, but at least gives her some momentum and hopefully some confidence.
Yeah, queen takes a4. What a hallucination. You got to wonder in those situations, was Valentina taking her foot off the gas just a little bit because she's got such a lead in the match? I don't think that's her style, but you have to wonder when there's such an uncharacteristic blunder. Or maybe we just deserve all the credit, Robert, because Valentina is absolutely dominating in this match. But the last couple of times that we've checked in on Vaishali, she's been doing really well, right? Turned around a lost position into a draw, and now just took a free queen.
Yeah, that was an unfortunate error for Gunina, but she can afford to make some errors now because of how well she's played to this point. The last game of the 3+1 has started for Yifan and Ushanina as well, so we can jump there at any moment. They're still relatively early in that game, and we can probably see that, there's got to be a checkmate in like 2 moves now. I mean, the king is castled queenside. There's all the pieces are staring at it. Where's the checkmate? Okay, knight d6 check.
Knight d6, nice. Yeah, and then just queen like c2 or something, right? Or c1, either one.
Yeah, queen c2, and then there's bishop c5, queen c5. There's bishop c6 as a response for black with check, and so it would be an immediate checkmate if the
maybe
right, just go away and say, please take my rook, have it. Then I'll take on c6, and everything is just completely. It's demolition at that point. So it's a win for Vaishali. Their 3-minute time control is over. This game will get canceled any second now. Let us go to the Yifan game versus Ushanina, because that match is very, very close.
Yeah. Let's check it out. This is they look like they switched up the opening a little bit. But let's just check in the position itself. So slightly better pawn structure for white, but rook e4 looks like a really nice move, attacking our knight on f4 and gaining control of the e-file.
Yeah, it's what this thing where, as you were saying, the pawn structure is good for white because white has only 2 pawn islands. And what's a pawn island? It's pawns on adjacent files. And black has this a pawn, which is isolated out here. So that is the good news for white. The bad news is, look at the rooks. Black has both of her rooks on an open file, the only fully open file on the board, and white's rooks are just where you castle to and on the starting square. So piece quality is clearly in black's favor. But what next, Jennifer? This position looks good for black, but what can we attack? What's our plan of action?
Oh, it's really tough, right? I mean, just kind of like hang around and make small improvements to our position and hope that you blunder something. I mean, c5, I want to do maybe h5, like after rook e5, I want to maybe play h5 and embarrass your knight on g3 a little bit. Like whenever I see a knight on that, what do I call it? G3, B3, B6, G6 square. I'm always thinking, can I play A4 and H4? Because it's an unpleasant situation for the knight to deal with.
I don't have a name for it. We should come up with one. So I'm going to think on it and maybe we'll get a good name for it. But I was always taught by my coach, Miron Scher, that knights on B3, G3, B6, and G6, those four squares, the knights are actually bad pieces there often because they stay too long. And I found that to be very true, where these knights will just like sit on G3 or B3 or B6, G6, those four squares. They'll just sit there for a really long time and get stuck there. And you can also attack it in a useful manner. H5 right now makes perfect sense to me. The rook on E5 is excellent. The knight on F6 is great. The rook, all of Black's pieces are pretty optimally placed. And there she goes with H5. So now it's time for the pawns to do their job. It's not just about the pieces. We have to start making progress with our pawns as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that way, and I love that this was one of the positional lessons that Miran Scher instilled in you. Well, I know that on G2, B2, and G7, the knight it's called like the dumb square for the knight.
Yeah.
So we can't copy that one. But yeah, she has followed through with playing H5 and H4 and shooting the knight to F1, but she's gained some space by having this pawn on H4. But honestly, I'm kind of happy as white that I'm able to move my knight to a more promising square like E3.
And trading off all the pieces, that feels like it's actually just sort of a handshake in a sense, because we can take a bunch of times on E2 and then bring that knight to E3. You were pointing out that square, and the D5 pawn is weak. And so Black played C5 several moves ago, and it's one that you sometimes are like, oh, if only my pawn were on C6, I protect my D5 pawn, and now I can actually use my activity to my advantage. Here, the activity is great for Black, but White has a clear target on D5, and so you'll take the A2 pawn, I'll take the D5 pawn. Likely, we will see a bunch of exchanges if pieces start getting traded off.
Wow, just an incredible number of draws in this match, if this one is as well. But okay, Hou Yifan decided not to take on E2 right away. She did play rook D2, rook D2, rook D2, and now Queen E4 played by Anna, showing she really is looking for those trades. Queen D1. What about like knight H5 here? Oh, no, it was hanging, sorry. But I was just thinking if I could somehow get my knight to F4, that would be really nice.
Honestly, that was actually possible. Oh, the knight was hanging on H5, right? Got it. I was like, wait, the D5 pawn's hanging, but then you have knight F4, but no, the knight was hanging on H5. So this is although somehow she got like an amazing endgame here. White can't move. White is actually permanently stuck here. What just happened?
Yeah, this looks like a bad incarnation, because what happens if like I take on B4 and then play D4 with the idea of knight C3? Isn't that annoying?
Yes. And you can also take and just go D4, D3, like push the D pawn all the way through. And the problem for White is that if this rook is not on C2, there's knight to D2 for Black because the knight is pinned. And you can't go F3 because there's knight to G3. So the fact that this pawn's on H3 for White is a bad thing. You would like to have it on H2. And now there's knight to D2, I think, is pretty convincing.
Yeah, knight D2 looks great. I mean, this is just totally winning, right?
Wow.
It's funny because I just play rook F2, and now you're also threatening knight to F1 ideas. Geez. This is weird because it seemed like Anna was continually offering a trade of queens, and Hou Yifan kept rejecting it until the situation was actually really good for Anna.
Right. And yeah, so we can look at it after this game concludes. This is the final game of 3+1, but it was a strange moment to exchange queens. She invited Anna's rook unopposed onto the first rank, her first rank, and Anna's last rank. And then it just from there seemed to be quite straightforward. And okay, there's time trouble, so watch out for a B5, like if the knight moves away and then freeing up the A pawn. But here the knight goes back to take on B5, the knight goes back to B6, and you have a nice pawn here for Black. So
yeah, this is not gonna do the trick.
I would pre-move at some point. 8 equals queen. Like just not pre-move. I would just do it. Not when the king's in check because it's too obvious.
Yes, God, I was just about to say same thing. Diabolical ideas, right? You got to wait till the king's on C5, so it's legal for them to forget about it.
And actually, I'm looking at the time spent after A7, King E5, King E3. Black spent 0.3 seconds on King E5, so I would have queened right here, because if she was hovering or holding her king, and you get a queen, and you're still holding this king, you may make the move King E5 regardless, because you think, oh, there's no way my opponent is going to play A8 because it just loses a pawn. Yes, by all objective standards, it's a bad move. It loses the pawn, but it is the best move in a dead loss position. I actually want to go back quickly to the point you're making, Jennifer, that after Queen E1 that's when she decided to take on E1, E5. So it feels like that was the losing decision almost. And maybe there were some chances to hold, but practically speaking, it was horrendous position for White after Queen takes E1. So what do you think was going on in her mind there, or her decision-making process?
Why she took on E1? You know what? I think it was like Anna kept begging to trade queens, and she maybe was lulled into a false sense of security that Anna just wanted to draw. That's maybe my take on it. And then maybe she just thought that after Queen E1, Rook E1, F3, she was doing okay. But she forgot about like the Rook C1 idea.
That's a great point. That like it looks okay for White because my next one's King F2. That's great. But you're totally right. You go Rook C1, you hit this C3 pawn, and this Rook is just stuck. It's between a rock and a hard place because at the Rook C1, you want to keep your Rook in the second rank, protecting the A2 pawn. And if you go Rook to D3, there's already like Knight H5, Knight G3 ideas, or Knight H5, Knight F4 ideas. Black is just making clear progress in a way that White can't fend off. So instead of trading queens, I think F3 to start with, it looks like a risky move because the dark squares, but your knight is actually covering everything. And so F3 to start with would allow the king to come to F2 in these endgames and none of this knight E4 business. So it's an understandable mistake, I think we would both agree, by Yifan, but one that cost her the game pretty much on the spot.
Yeah, very instructive. It's all about assessing and evaluating when you're talking about these queen trades. And I hope that a lesson, I know some people are just watching this for entertainment, and that's great. But if you're also, trying to get some nuggets of self-improvement, chess improvement from the show, please take with you the idea that when there are queen trades on offer, slow down and use it as a learning moment.
For sure. And well, we will take a quick break. We will return in a few minutes with the bullet portion. This is a tied matchup, so you will want to be here when we return for this FIDE Chess.com Women's Speed Chess Championship matchups. return here just a minute away or so from the bullet portion. We have a tied matchup between former women's world champions Anna Ushanina and Hou Yifan. It's always funny to say that, former champion, world champion, when she's 25 years old, 26 years old, and still is the highest rated player in the world. But Hou Yifan, she has taken a break from over the board chess for the most part because of her studies. I'm hoping she gets back at it because she's such a phenomenal player, but she has her hands so full right now with Anna Ushanina. Jennifer, who's going to take this in the bullet?
Wow. At the beginning of the day, I said Anna and you said Hou Yifan. So let's just stick with our original predictions.
Okay, in bullet, anything can happen. I'm getting nervous. Anna Ushanina, well, I don't trust Ifan's rating on the side just because she hasn't played so many games, small sample size. And are we going to get this bishop e7, bishop e6 thing again?
Yeah. So I think it was, God, I can't remember the name now, but there was a very Taim99, I believe, who explained why that white can't play bishop g3 and kind of maintain the tension like they might want to. But okay, we're already way past that, as this knight h5 move you alluded to last game is now on the board, and knight f4 is the idea.
I can tell that Ifan looked at this position during the break, or like just, went through her game and just like, where can I improve? Because she blundered a pawn in the previous rendition of this type of position. Now knight takes d5 comes with a tempo on the queen. So I think you can play knight takes d5 and queen e4. There may even be f5 and e4 type stuff. You have to be very careful here from white already. And h6 with a tempo? Like, where's your queen going?
Yeah, queen h4, I guess. And now, just with the idea that you don't have that many pieces on the king side, and maybe there are some potential tactics on your d8 rook. Mm-hmm. But what about just bringing that knight back in f4? And well, no, she's played f5, hyper aggressive here. I don't know. I'm scared here.
That's such a brave move.
I in a good way or a bad way, though. Bishop c4 played bishop e6. Now rook e1.
I would say my first instinct was in a bad way, but now that I look at there might even be knight takes e4 here and then take with a queen on e4. Like, I don't see it. I don't see the conclusion of that variation, but something tells me there are tactics in the air here on the e4 square.
Yeah, but instead queen g3 played in this position. Wait, I'm with the idea that you can't take on f3 because of rook takes e6. Right. So is the endgame very strong here for white? I can't tell you. We'll have to keep going. Knight h4, g6 playable, right?
And then g4 perhaps play white. So white trying to undermine the defense of this e4 pawn. And I think now's a good time to play g4. She does it. And e3. Aha, trying to play f4 next. If you get a pawn chain in the dark squares there, that's going to be a really dangerous pass pawn.
Well, that's what happened. Knight f1, f4 on the board.
Oh, but g6 is hanging, no? Oh, she found it. So bishop takes d5, and then knight takes g6, and f4 collapses. And once f4 goes down, then goes e3. Oh, what a timely tactic by Anna Ushanina there.
Well, she's clipped a2, has Hou Yifan, so she's temporarily restored material equality, but the problem is that e3 pawn is hanging as well.
And now it's 2 pawns. She lost f4 and then e3, right? Right after making it equal material, she lost both pawns. And here it should be Ushanina's game. Wow, that's crazy how the turnaround happens. I was liking Black's position early. I think f5. You asked me, and I was kind of like, oh, I don't know about that. It looks too risky, and I think it clearly was too risky for a bullet game.
Yeah, that's the problem. It's harder for Black to play than white once you play a move like f5, because you need to take such care not to blunder, whereas white just kind of hangs out looking for that blunder. And now we have this position with an extra 2 pawns. Is it 2 or 3?
It's now 3.
It's 3 now. But that said, it is bullet, so it's not over till it's over. Rook b4 just played.
Great move.
Yeah, I like that move as well too.
I was going to say that Ifan should probably resign and just get more bullet games because there is an overall match clock. So by playing this out, you could run the risk of removing time to get an extra game. And she does finally resign here.
She did do it.
She could have resigned a minute ago. And that way it would have given her the opportunity to look for an additional bullet game if she's only down 1 point, right? She can give herself more chances with more opportunities.
Wait, okay, so we've got a Vienna. Ooh, I like the Vienna. I feel like that's a really fun opening, underrated. And here we have it, Hou Yifan playing it. I don't know about this fianchetto variation of it though. Does white have anything here? Well, it doesn't really matter as much as normal because it is a bullet game. So it's just about getting a nice playable position.
Yeah, and I think Carissa Yip has become a fan of these Vienna games. She, in playing the IM non-GM Speeches Championship, played this a bunch of times against her brother. And this position, to my eyes, looks good for white. The bishop on G2, clearly better than the bishop on C8. The bishop on A3, I think better than the bishop on G7. And knight C5 here shows that the white knight going to C5 is better than this knight on E7. So
yeah, you did such a great job commentating on that match with Adanya Naroditsky and Greg kept getting horrible positions with black. And after the match, I was like, why did you keep playing it? It's like I thought it shouldn't be that good for white. There's no should or shouldn't in chess now.
Oh, knight takes C4. Oh, I wasn't even looking for that. The queen was hanging on D2.
That's right. So there was a pin there. The pawn on D3 was pinned, so you couldn't take back. And another pin, though. Bishop takes C6. B takes C6, queen takes B8. So it looks like Hou Yifan has regained the pawn. But the problem is these two bishops for black look very promising.
They
and
do.
The fact that we could play maybe E4 at some point, uncovering the attack on your queen on B2.
So she brings a queen to B3 to avoid that E4 idea, which was a very good one. And now the knight has to retreat, so probably bringing it to E4 is the best move. And I actually think that black is slightly better, but not so much better here. And I like white's advantage in the clock. So she's spending precious seconds here. I would make the move knight E4. I didn't see anything better than that. I wonder what she was considering, because knight E4 was kind of the quote-unquote obvious move. Ooh, queen A3 hitting A7, hitting E7.
And I'm not scared of you taking on A7. Come on. That's not a pawn you want to grab.
Yeah, even Yasser would refrain from taking that one.
Yeah, he has his limits. So king takes G2. Okay, rook C7. Kind of trying to line up on that C file. I like it. The knight on C3, if it moves, we get to take on C2.
Right, and if you take on C2, D3 is also weak, but A7 and B6 can be captured. So queen takes D3, then there's queen B8 check. Very important move because the bishop has to block, and there would have been queen takes E5. So instead, Ushina starts with bishop to F8, and I think you can just take on B6. And if she takes the rook, because knight F6 check, this is actually not who's better. Like this, both kings are unsafe.
Yeah, rook C1, threatening queen F1 check. But what's going on? So knight E check, A check. We have king H6.
Yeah, there's king H6 there, but
well, we might repeat it. No, she did not repeat. She played queen A6, protecting the F1 square, but there's queen A4 check as well.
And queen F5, you have to go back to G2, and a rook C2. She gonna make a draw this way?
I think so. Yeah.
Oh, rook C2.
What a well-played game. That felt more like a 3-minute game than a 1-minute game, I got to tell you.
Yeah, and Ushinina, she's a 1-point lead with just over 2.5 minutes. This could be the final game. And this actually goes to show, Jennifer, what I was saying. If Hou Yifan had resigned earlier, let's say this game ends in a draw, but the game goes really long, this could be the last game of the match. But if she had resigned earlier in that first bullet game, she would have time remaining on the match clock. So I don't blame her for playing on. You never want to just give up the game and take a deficit in the match. But that was a very important moment there.
Right. And you've called so many of those speed chess champs that you're really invested in the nuances of that or cognizant of them. I think the players, the biggest focus is trying to make the best moves and watch your clock. I think it's kind of hard when you're in the zone in a bullet game to think about all that, right?
Right.
Maybe in the last game, though. In the last game, I think it's just immediate. It's right in your face. So I think Hou Yifan will be cognizant of that she needs to resign if she's if she resigns, it's over. Sorry. Well, yeah. If there's a draw, she needs to try to make it quickly so that she'll have a chance to come back, right?
Exactly. So there's a minute and a half where I keep glancing over at the overall match clock. If, say, there are 30 seconds left, it's actually easier for me to see because I'm not playing in the game, but I can look and see how much time's left. But she may have a perpetual check or some kind of repetition. You just take it. But look at the time left on each player's clock. There's a minute and 20 seconds in the match, and about, if I do quick math here, about the same amount of time on the board. That means that Yifan has to win this game. I think they already must win.
I agree, Robert, because Anna will just be able to try to avoid resignation if she wants to. I think this is going to be the last game, so Hou Yifan has to win. And now let's just look at the position, though. I mean, Black's not doing that well, right? I mean, look at this queen H5 threatening queen H7 mate, forcing this queen H6 move. And the queens have come off the board, but I still like white. we're gonna play rook f1. Your pawn on g5 sticks out like a sore thumb, and now we just actually clipped your pawn on d5. No, looks like Anna's gonna win this match.
Yeah, because if anybody's better here, it's white. She's up a pawn. She has opposite colored bishops to rely on if all else fails, and the d4 pawn is protected for now by this knight in c2. So actually, I don't even see how black tries to make inroads. G4 is a good move, maybe bishop c1, bishop b2 kind of thing. And actually, I think that was a really good move there by Ifan, considering the match situation. So rook d6, good.
I mean, if Anna gets a chance to force a draw, she will grab it with both hands, as you just want to advance at this point against the second highest female player in all of history. It's an accomplishment to beat Hou Yifan in a match, and she's very close to it.
She should play rook d5 now, because rook d5 forces the rook. She plays bishop d5 instead, which is probably still a good move, but rook d5 forced the rooks off the board. And well, now she blundered f7. She's losing c7. She resigns, but that's it. Gunina takes the match, and of course, Valentina Gunina wins the other one, even though there's still one game remaining in that match. So what a crazy match that was, for sure. And we have one game left. It doesn't change the overall score, or it'll change the overall score, of course, but it doesn't change the winner between Gunina and Vaishali. But for Vaishali, it'd be nice to leave the knockout on a win here.
Yeah, and that was really just incredibly well done. I have to give a big shout out to Gunina. I thought the match was just really well played by both players. Very well deserved victory, though. And yeah, let's just see how this one ends, Robert.
And okay, we may get a queen e4. It looks like the white king is in worse shape, but if you risk it, there's queen d7 check coming, and your king might get in trouble as well. So I think that this one could end in a peaceful result, and feels like we're getting there. We have. And we get no break, Jennifer. The next games are
getting set up right now, as we have Kateryna Lagno joining the fray, and she's going to play against Zhansaya Abdumalik, who impressed us so greatly yesterday. And that was a match that we followed so closely yesterday because it was close. And then we also have Sarah Kadin back in the action. This is going to be another great duo of matches.
Yeah, we are spoiled, honestly, in these matches, because it just feels like everyone is a good one. Even the ones that end up being lopsided, you go into it thinking both players have a chance here. And I have the game up between Olga Giria and Sarah Kateryna, because I don't know, the opening is always fascinating to me, and these kind of QGD Rogozins where it feels like both players are doing wild things. The kings are in the center, black's pawn structure is compromised. What do you sort of make of this opening choice and how this game is going?
Oh, let me just pop it open again. Let's see. Oh, this is just this wild stuff. That king on e7. Why like white? You show me that king on e7. Let me open up the game myself too, so I can see it. What do you think?
Yeah, my first glance tells me there's a king on e7 that has to be problematic, and then okay, I trust Sarah to come up with good ideas, so her king is not on e7 for no reason whatsoever. But I always like king safety in blitz games, so I'm with you. I think that it has to be good for white. This g3 move to get the bishop out to g2 next, and this is where it's good to spend your time. So this changes the entire trajectory of the game. Do I take with the pawn on c3, or do I take with the rook on c3? She takes with the rook, and the difference is now queen b4 is an option for black, whereas if you took with the pawn, you wouldn't be able to offer that queen trade. So I like that Olga Giria has spent some time there, 23 seconds, I see, in fact, because that was a very important decision.
Yeah, and now I'm following the game on the live board as well. And after rook c3, queen b4, we talked about it as well. Okay, rook c6, I was wondering if it worked, but it was a check, so of course it didn't work. And a3. I'm always looking for those little in-between moves, Robert.
It's important to, and I always say that they're never, and for everybody watching, really take this to heart. There is no such thing, in my opinion, as a quote-unquote stupid suggestion or like a stupid idea. The only thing you can do that's detrimental is not offering them, because you never know when it will work. So, you made a mistake. You're a very strong player, but you're like, oh, rook takes knight. Oh, the rook is pinned. I forgot about it. But there will be times when you do have a renegade rook and get a check afterwards. So I think that it's good that you're always on the lookout for that.
Exactly. Totally. Yeah. Always look at crazy things. And the funny thing is, the time is usually not wasted because if you look at it and it doesn't work for some reason, a lot of times a few moves later, the position changes a little bit and suddenly your stupid tactical idea becomes a brilliant one.
1,000% true, right? You never know when that will be relevant information, so it's important to store that. It's hard to do that in a blitz game in particular, but you are storing that information. Just like, when can I offer a rook trade? Like, can I move this knight out the way, or does that have a problem? If I move the knight, will the rook stop on c7 rather than taking on c8? Like, these are all these things that you should just like keep in your mind and then try to assess them as the positions arise. But it's you need to have the ideas in the first place. So never is a bad thing. The more ideas you have, as long as you try to avoid the blunders and find the good ones. Easier said than done, of course.
So, how do you feel about the size of White's advantage? Because I think we can say like White has a better pawn structure. You'd rather be White. The bishop on g2 is sweet. At the same time, though, that king on e7 is in the center already, so that's good in the end game. Is this a big advantage for White, or do you just like it for White a little bit?
I think the advantage is it has the potential to be like, I think it was like a potential advantage where in this immediate position, I think that black probably is objectively okay. But what's black's plan? And coming up with a plan is very difficult. It's much more difficult than finding a one move tactic. And that's the struggle. Do I play e5? But if I play e5, wait a second, Jennifer, doesn't that weaken some of my light squares? Do I play f5? But wait, does that actually free up the e5 square for this white knight? And she plays knight to d4, threatening the e2 pawn with check and also offering exchanges here on c3. So again, I saw the first move, but now the question still remains: does black want to trade both pairs of rows, or is just one enough? I'm going to throw it back to you because I'm not entirely positive myself. But kind of what is your plan from the black side of this?
Well, the b7 pawn is hanging, so rook c8 right away. I could try bishop b7, rook c3, pawn c3, knight b5. I guess you're forking those pawns, so still seems kind of thin. But the other idea for black here is to just play like bishop b5, right? With the idea that if knight d3, we still have, I don't know, maybe bishop b5, knight d3. That I'm kind of wondering how that turns out.
Because that adds another dimension. Do I take on d3 and give up my bishop for your knight? I think we both are like, no, probably not, because you're going to need that light square bishop. But you always want to ask yourself, what pieces do I want to trade? And bishop b5 looks like a great move. And after knight d, she plays bishop c6. She says, I'm okay trading the bishops, but white's knight, after we trade on c6, his knight's coming to d3 and then likely into a square like c5. I feel like white is just more active, and the pawn structure does black no favors, because if you can jump this rook over to h4 at some point, this h7 pawn is a real target and one that cannot be protected by another pawn. So I think we've liked white's position the whole time. I still think the advantage objectively isn't that tremendous, but practically it's growing.
Yeah, I agree. And let's also the time discrepancy is also growing. As at well, actually, sorry, I said that the opposite way. Olga was down a couple of minutes, but Sarah, in trying to defend this position, is equalizing the time a little bit. But let's go to the other game because we're still in the throes of the middle game there between Kateryna Lagno and Abdumalik. As I feel like we're quickly going to get a sense of which match is going to be closer today. Let's see. Rook A8 just played by Zhansaya. Knight B4. Okay. It looks like the two bishops for black, a passed A pawn for white, but those center pawns for black could be quite nasty.
Yeah, it has the vibes of a Sicilian. Even I thought this was a Sicilian, and then I looked and it says it's from the Spanish. So I'm like, what do I know about opening choices?
Yeah, I would have made the same mistake. So bishop e6 played, and then a rook to c1. Like, how do we get those center pawns rolling for black? Abdumalik's not concerned about that yet. What she wants to do is very clever. She wants to make the move bishop h5, threatening e4. So that's a definitely interesting idea. c5. Whoa, what's this move?
Yeah, well, this is getting hectic. She's trying. Lagno is trying to undermine the defense of the e5 pawn, I guess, but it does feel somewhat shaky. And the rook c6 played. The pawn cannot move from c5, otherwise you lose a rook on c1 with check. Very importantly. And also look at that clock, Jennifer. I didn't even notice that at first. And I'm actually I'm noticing myself not notice the situation on time. during these matches today. I've been so focused on the actual board, but the clock is so important. And here, Lagno is down almost a minute, but it's a very complex situation where this E5 pawn needs the defense of the D6 pawn, but I actually think immediately there's too many threats with C takes D6, and now knight takes C5 is possible, and she plays it because the rook is under attack on C6.
But what about rook E6? That's going to force bishop C3 to avoid both tactics, right? But then we just have to assess what happens after bishop D6. But I guess you always have that F4 move, which is very useful. Maybe Black should consider playing F4 herself, and she did it.
Mm-hmm. And that's likely a good choice just to stop white from doing so. Oh, queen E4 is a good response, though, because now look at the rook on A8 hanging. Wait, but the E5. So this past A pawn scares me, but this you could take on E5 and get 2 pieces for the rook. Take with the rook, because your rook E1 check is a big threat.
Yeah, and just in general, I'd rather have a middle game when I have the 2 bishops, because if I can keep a middle game, I have a chance to checkmate you. Whereas if I'm in an endgame, the A pawn's just going to be super strong.
Very true, because the rook and the bishops have a harder time coordinating because the queen can line up on a diagonal and threaten something very legitimate. So rook E1 check is a knockout blow. She brings the queen back to D2 just to avoid losing her queen. And now I would think about playing C4 and then bishop C5. What you need to do, and bishop B5 is a good starting move, I would say, but C4, bishop C5, that way your bishops are very active and you're actually creating threats. Rook G5, don't trade rooks, go for the attack. Ooh, Jennifer, this is looking problematic, and then some for white.
Yeah, it's just super instructive. This is what you want to do with the 2 pieces. You want to checkmate, because the A pawn isn't going to be strong if you don't checkmate. So time is of the essence. Bishop A8 lining up for queen C6, and you don't have a light squared bishop. You don't have a square to defend the light squares.
Was there not like a checkmate mating net here? Like takes on G3, queen G3, king had to go to F1. It felt like this king had to be checkmated, but I don't see it. Oh, this queen takes H3 check. That's the mate. That's actually crazy. You take a pawn that seems irrelevant, but you're forcing the king to F2, then you check on G2 and check on F3 with mate. So there was a mating pattern available, and it's easy for me to say. I always say this when I commentate. I love sacrificing pieces that are not mine. Because if I'm in a game and I have a minute on my clock, I would spend some of that time to figure it out. But if I don't see it, then I'm not going for it just because I can. Whereas if I'm commentating, I go for it. And then once I see the position on the board, which they can't, right, until they make the moves, I can make the moves, see it on the board, see, that didn't work out. Let me take it back. They have to figure out entirely in advance, which makes commentary a little easier on you psychologically to find these tactics. Bishop E7,
Yeah,
don't
absolutely. And look at what's happened in the game. Bishop E7 was just played, saying that if you play queen takes E7, queen G2 is mate, but A7 on the board. And honestly, I think the explanation, Robert, is that she figured she didn't have to calculate, that she could just checkmate without that because her position is so strong. But not so clear. Queen takes E7 just played. Rook to D2. Is this going to be winning? Rook takes D2, pawn takes D2, queen E6 check or queen E8 check?
Well, I was thinking queen D8 check actually picked up the pawn on D2. So both players are missing things in their time trouble down to the bullet portion of this game here. But
now we have king H. What do we do now? King H7, queen takes C6. Huh?
You had to go king H7 there because this is just losing on the spot. So
yeah,
even if you don't see anything, this is completely lost. Whereas king H7, and I'll pull up the board really quickly. King H7 at least gives you some chances because actually, if you take my queen on C6, I take your rook on E1 and make a queen myself. So actually, there would have been good chances to survive this position for black. White would still be better, but there were chances to hold. So that's a missed opportunity there for Zhansaya. And I think she kind of floundered, and then she had a tactical position where she was better, and she just blundered in one move. Really, that's what happened. She lost this game because she forgot her bishop was hanging here, and rook A2 was a great move by Lagno to cover the checkmate square.
Yeah, great game though. I mean, if this is the type of chess we're going to see from these players, it's going to be a real treat. It's very dynamic, filled with lessons. That's actually an important lesson for everyone watching, that the 2 pieces thrive when there is issues of king safety. But when those queens come off the board, that passed A pawn is everything that Kateryna needed to win the game.
For sure. And there's so many instructive moments in every single game of chess, whether it's a tactical game or more of a strategic battle. You'll always have something to learn. And this end game, there's a lot to learn here because usually a 2-on-1 is winning for the side with the 2 pawns. But here it's not so easy because this F7 pawn will become a target. An f5 now is rook e3. Oh, and this is immediately a draw. Take the rook. No, take the rook and bring the king. This is losing now.
Why? Why? She also only has 2 seconds left, Robert.
That's why. You said why. Now I know why. Again, I wasn't looking at the clock. So it's understandable. You're trained. If you're down material and you're down a pawn, do not trade pieces. And actually, Okagiria, for the second day in a row, has had a problem with that, where she actually offered a trade against Ju June and lost that king and pawn in game. And here she didn't trade. So something about trading in time trouble is something that's, I think, very challenging for her. And it is for most people. So I don't want to sound like I'm picking on her.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Like, good catch about yesterday, Robert, because maybe she was a little traumatized by that turnaround that she was totally winning and ended up actually losing the game. So she might have kind of coaxed her not to do the same thing again.
Yeah, you learn your lesson, but unfortunately, the lesson doesn't always apply to the given position. So it's interesting to see that unfold. But Sarah is going to take this first game here against, and this is a long first game. We're already about halfway through the longest time patrol. And for Sarah, she's pushing her pawns. She has the king helping out. Here comes e3, and the king can come into f3, and you're going to help deliver a checkmate or help yourself promote, or both. Rook h2. Rook h2 was available. Rook h2 now threatens checkmate and threatens the rook, and there it is.
There, wow, very nicely done by Sarah, who now starts with that 1-0 lead. As you mentioned, Robert, that there might be fewer games in this match because of how long that first one took. Let's hop back into the game between Abdumalik and Lagno. That is a Roy Lopez, a favorite here. We've seen so many. This one, black is fianchetto, not really the typical Roy Lopez idea. D4 played, and what do you think of this opening for black?
Yeah, I used to play ideas like this from the black side. They're kind of suspect. The knight on e7, I keep talking about this, but I tend to repeat certain themes. The knight on e7 here is dominated by the pawn on e4, and which is why black just took on d4. And you'll say, wait, Robert, what does that have to do with the knight on e7? Now black can consider playing d5. If you take back with this pawn on d4, I'll play d5 to open up squares for my knight, whether it's f5 or d5, while shutting your bishop out on b3 in the process. So that's why the center was clarified, and that's why Zhansaya, you typically want to take with your pawn and have two pawns in the center. She took with the knight, so keeping more opportunities to open the position in this one.
Yeah, bishop e3 played. Kind of really do like white's position. d5. Now, what should white do here? If we take on d5 and you play knight d5, we really don't want to allow you to do something like knight takes e3.
Right. And maybe that means bishop e3 was imprecise, and move like queen f3 could have been played or something like that. But knight e2.
Oh, that's pawn e4, queen d8, and bishop f7, right? And that is a more valuable pawn, I think, to win on f7, because then the rest of your pawns are going to be super weak.
Right, and you're left with an isolated pawn e4, and the g6 pawn doesn't have a defender. I like that move, knight e2. And these retreating moves, these backwards moves, are hard for a lot of players to see. But Zhansaya was like, oh, not for me. I got this. I'm going to bring my knight back. And now her pawn structure is better. But is that enough? Because black is about to see some activity, at least that's her hope, with maybe bishop to b5, bishop into d3. Is white really that happy here, or is initial looks at the aesthetics of the position, the pawn structure, can that be deceiving?
Bishop a4 play, trying to wrest the control over that d file.
Yeah, so you're hitting this rook. I think I would drop my bishop home to b3 and offer an exchange, because I didn't want to play b3 because this pawn on c3 is weaker now.
Yeah, but I like the way Zhansaya is playing this b3, bishop e5, knight d4, looking at both the e6 square and the b5 bishop.
I think I underestimated this knight jump, because I was thinking about loosening protection of the pawns, and the c3 pawn in particular. And I'm looking at bishop at d3, but you're right, the knight is coming to e6 at some moment. So, wow, Lagno just says, I'm forcing you to move that knight, and you're going to trade something here. You have no choice. What a move, knight f5.
Knight to f5. Yeah, that's a weird looking move, but could be a very strong one, because knight takes f5, pawn takes e5, bishop e6, king g6, and you're actually happy about all of those developments.
for sure.
Knight e6 doesn't really lead to anything. What do I do here for white? I feel like and this is what I meant, guys. When there's a lot of captures possible, like I could take on f5, I could take on b5, you might be taking on e3, I might be taking on d1. That's a time when it's probably a critical moment, and you can think. If it's a classical game, you can think for 5-10 minutes. If it's a blitz game, you can afford to think for 20 seconds. And 96 was Abdumalik's choice.
And look at that, bishop takes c3, giving up the rook on d8 because the rook on a1 is hanging. And it's all these hanging pieces at this point. I feel like there has to be something for white. Like rook takes d8, rook takes and then rook to c1. And I think that's what's probably about to happen because rook c1
nice. And then rook d3?
And rook d3, maybe knight f4 or something like that, trying to kick your rook out from its defense of the bishop.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to sacrifice the exchange and see if that pawn on d3 will be strong enough to justify it.
It looks scary. It actually really looks scary if you end up taking, sacrificing the exchange on that square and taking with the pawn here. I'm not convinced that white is actually so much better here. And rook to d3, I don't see anything besides rook d3 because rook d7 is a blunder because of knight f8 check and forking the rook. So she did.
There it is. So she's forced into the super exciting line. Okay, so knight c5 and knight f4 both have the same intent. And by the way, you can throw in the move knight takes e3 potentially. And then if knight d3, pawn d3, pawn e3, there's also bishop d2. That's annoying.
Yeah, and just pushing that pawn to d2 is scary enough as it is. Yeah, you're right that black is getting some really quick play there. So he takes on g6.
Bishop d6, bishop g6, king g6, knight f4. This is her idea. She's doing this line with check, thinking that at the end of the day, the bishop on c3 is in take. Knight d3.
Oh, his pawn is too strong, no? Like rook c3, knight e3, pawn takes d2.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
So wait a second. White has a move here. No, but then you're just gonna have two pieces for the rook. But look at this, a4. That's her idea. Rook knight e3, little in between move, and it looks like black wins.
Yeah, you were right. You called this from a mile away. You're like, wait, if rook d3, you take on d3. Once I take back with that pawn, that's going to be really dangerous. In fact, Kateryna Lagno just wins the game very quickly there because of that passed pawn. So the tactics end up not working out in Zhansaya's favor, and I really think that move b3 was the culprit. Even if objectively, if you plug it into an engine, we're not using engines, but if you plugged it in, it's like, yeah, you can handle this. Over the board with 2 minutes in your clock where every single piece is hanging and there are all these wild tactics, you're going to get yourself in trouble quite often. I love that we're seeing a Vienna in this game by Kateryna Lagno.
Yeah, Vienna, and this is one of the reasons that the Vienna is attractive. And I had tried to play it when I was a kid. Is that I love the idea of somehow getting to castle and already having my pawn on f4 with the bishop on c4. The problem is black doesn't make it that easy, so it's not that easy for white to castle here kingside, right? We might have to try to find a way to go queenside.
That's for sure, because the bishop on c5 is so strong. If you play d4, that allows you to castle, but it loosens up your defense of the e4 pawn. So d4 is actually a move that you think you want to play, but you don't actually want to play it too early. And knight a5 comes in, getting this bishop. The bishop was very happy, putting pressure on the king side. The bishop will not exist too much longer. It'll be traded off. So I think out of the openings, Zhansaya should be, fine. But I have an affinity for this position from the white side. I have to admit it. I played it growing up. It was actually like my favorite opening to play. And now bishop g5 goes in for a pin. But should we head on over to the other matchup, because we're still in the second game of that match?
Yeah, sure. Lagno has started 2-0, so Abdumalik is really going to need to score some points to get back into the match, obviously. But we want matches to be close, right? Now, Queen H4 just played by Sarah in this position where she's got a 2-minute edge on her opponent. Like, that doesn't bode super well. But what about the position?
Yeah, white is up a pawn. I had to do a quick count because an H pawn is mysteriously missing. But that's the only thing I like about white's position is the extra pawn. And I'm trying to work through what typically is this, the term compensation. What does that mean to most people that either hear it, they're like, oh, grandmasters and commentators, they say compensation, and I'm supposed to understand that. What does that mean? Like, so the compensation for black here is the bishop on d6 is way better than the counterpart on e1. The bishop on d5 currently is doing its job protecting e4, but the bishop on f1, it's better. The bishop on d5, excuse me, is better than the bishop on f1. The rook on a4 on an open file, very useful. And the rooks on c1 and c2 are staring at c7, but that one bishop on d6 takes care of both rooks, it seems like. So I think that black has individual elements that are favorable for her, but at the end of the day, there is an extra pawn, and h4 is coming, and the black king isn't entirely shielded. So, Jennifer, would you think that white is like a lot better here, or that black is that this compensation isn't so vague and actually there's plenty of it?
I think that in a blitz game, there's plenty of it, but just look at White's clock. There might be plenty of compensation, but she's only got 30 seconds left. So I'm still feeling good about White here.
Yeah, it's not a lot of time for Gira, and she keeps spending I'm looking at her last couple moves. There's 11, 13, 5, 8, 7 seconds on these moves. And when you're down at now 25 seconds, you can't afford to be spending that kind of time. And she brings her queen to d5. She replaces the bishop with the queen. And watch out for the b5 pawn falling. Watch out for the h file actually being useful for black. Rook h8, move the king, bring the other rook to h7. And the fact that you're down a pawn is a huge advantage rather than a problem. So what you lack in material, you make up for in open files. And by the way, Kateryna Lagno won again, her third straight victory.
Oh, well, that was a pretty quickie too, because she must have had some kind of middle game tactic as we had just started that game. All right, so that's a great way. People sometimes make fun of me for looking at the positives in bad situations, Robert, but I think that explanation takes the cake. It's good to lose pawns because you'll have open files.
I think people forget about that often. They're like, oh, I'm down a pawn. There's nothing to be gained from it, but there's an open file. And it may be irrelevant most of the time when you just blunder your pawn, but there will be moments where it surely is important to watch out because queen g4 was an idea. So that's why Gira put a queen on f5. And this h4 move, double edge. On one hand, you're trying to expose black's king, but isn't white's king in worse shape here? Rook h8, queen h3 coming now.
That's right. Rook b6 played rook h8. These moves are easy to play even with 10 seconds on the clock. Can Olga tie up the score? Look at this queen f1 move. She's just trying to play queen g2 against queen h7, right? That fianchettoed queen is pretty strong in defense. And there we see it. The queen shows up on g2. If rook h7, there's rook takes d6.
Yeah, that's the problem is now rook c1 to c6 keeps that rook stuck protecting the pawn. And now queen f5 back. I thought, okay, rook b4 goes after the pawn, and she won on time. The position was, it was getting good for white anyway, but you never want to lose on the clock. You always would prefer to go down swinging.
But nice defense by Sarah finding these moves, queen f1, queen g2, to avoid checkmate and end up winning on time. They've started their next game. Of course, they start immediately. And wow, it looks like we've got two lopsided matches so far. Which one do you think the player is more likely to make a comeback?
I would say Olga Gira. She had a great match yesterday, a very nerve-wracking one where she scored the upset victory. So I think that she has chances to come back, whereas Kateryna Lagno is the favorite on paper and now being the favorite on the scoreboard. That this matchup between Sarah and Olga originally felt more like a toss-up, whereas I think we would give the nod to Lagno most of the time, even if we make a prediction in a single match for Zhansaya. But with the score 3-0, and I'm going to tune into the Zhansaya game against Lagno to see if there is a chance here for the boxer from Kazakhstan. We learned yesterday that she is an avid boxer, so that's why I say that if she's a chance here. And well, she's actually up a minute and a half, and her king is safe, so this is the time to strike back.
Yeah, I agree. And your answer was exactly what I was going to say, Robert. It's just 3-0 is very different than 2-0. I'm a big math person, and that was my conclusion. Seriously though, because it's a psychological effect. Like 2-0, you win one and you're a point within the distance, right? 3-0, you just have so much distance to cover. But this is the Speed Chess Championship. So the cool thing about being the trailing player is there are quicker games coming up. So rook to d1 played, and I just love white's position because we get to play bishop to d6 next, and you can't castle.
And white's not even down a pawn anymore. Like after all of that, white stole back the pawn on c7, and now you have a situation, as you're pointing out, the king is stuck in the center. So if you were Lagno here, you're winning in the match, but in this game, you're probably feeling quite uncomfortable. And what kind of setup, what kind of moves are you going for here? Rook d6 traps the queen? No, there's queen c4. Okay, but I thought the queen was trapped. And Olga Giria won her game.
But just rook d6. Oh, good. So that match is now 2-1. All right, nice. And yeah, your prediction about.
Oh my gosh. Do you see what happened there?
What?
Knight a5 was played, and then rook takes a5, and Tsar resigned.
Oh, knight a5, rook a5. Wow.
Just
There,
one of those.
She meant to play b6 first, and she, like a finger failure, right? I think she wanted to play b6 followed by knight a5.
I guess she couldn't even play b6. I think she just forgot that the rook was in c5. Like,
Oh, she can't play b6 either. There's a rook on c1. Sorry, I was just starting looking at this for the first time. But yeah, she can't play b6 either. That, I don't know. Just sometimes when you're playing blitz chess, just something simple escapes you, and um, it's fun to call in a way, but it makes it just so high pressure for the players. I like to call chess in general the one of the difficult things about chess is like it's all about not blundering, right? So you're kind of like walking around in the chess game, like hoping not to fall flat on your face. And in blitz, it's impossible to avoid. You're going to blunder at some point. So you come into a blitz game knowing that it's going to happen and having to make the best of it and come back from them. Now let's go back to this very rich Abdumalik Lagno game. As we thought White was just dominating, but somehow Lagno got the castle and Abdumalik's not up any material.
She's not material, but she does have pressure, and f5 is the first move that's on my mind. And she plays f5. You're just opening up the black king because f6 becomes a threat with forks. And how do you make this work? If you take on f5, the knight takes on f5, and that doesn't really look right from Abdumalik's point of view. And f5 is a move that I can suggest very easily because I'm commentating, and it looks like a good move. But now you sit here and look at it, and you're like, wait a second, did I just make a mistake? Because what have I really achieved just to get this move f5 in? I mean, if I have to take on e7, I'm not happy about that. I give black the lone bishop on the board. So f5, first move that came to my mind, easy for me to suggest, harder to make work in a game setting.
Okay, rook de1. What kind of impression does this move make on you? Rook de1, rook a1. Rook de1, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I get it. I see why you're doing it. It doesn't make the greatest impression on me just because I felt like that instead of maybe f4, queen g6, trying to trade queens, but this position here, I see play for both sides, that there's immediate pressure on the f file, but black tends to enjoy having control of this e5 square for her pieces. So, I mean, Jennifer, which side would you prefer to have here? That's a difficult question to answer, I feel like, so I'm going to throw it to you.
Which side? Yeah, man, and I was trying to cop out with the person with the more time, but they're exactly equal. I'll go with white because I feel like the king safety is stronger for white, and that's always so big in blitz games.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I'm thinking like down the road, I could see black having an advantage because the extra pawn on the queen side and the quality of the bishop on g7. That's a great piece on the long diagonal fianchettoed here. So I can see how if certain trades happen, for example, if the queens come off, black will have rich play immediately, some dynamic chances. But rook f5 is a very smart move. Say, Robert, you said you want queens off? Nope. I'm not your friend here. I'm your adversary. So I think that white will continue h4, h5. We talked about this knight on g6. It might have to go to e5, but does that really help out, or is there going to be some attacking chances? That's the essential question.
h4, rook d7 on the board. Lagno seems unconcerned with the idea of h5. Don't forget, there is a move knight e5. I would love to play rook e5, but it doesn't really work.
It almost does.
It almost works. I know it's kind of fun, but I guess queen takes g4, rook takes e8, check, bishop f8. Hey, it's still worth looking at, isn't it? Unless there's something simpler I'm missing.
No, that would win for white at bishop f8. The problem is
bishop
that
e5, right?
Yeah, exactly. You can play bishop e5, and that way the queens are now under attack, so there's no discovered check. That's actually a crazy variation. I'm glad we were able to see that because rook e5, the only way to take back is with the bishop, which for most people is hard to fathom because you're walking into discovered check, but then you remember the queens are attacking each other because rook e5, queen e5, there's queen takes d7. So just important to go through these tactics move by move so everybody can understand why it may or may not work. And now we've seen the bishops come off, so I'm sure that Your reaction, Jennifer, isn't Black's king in worse shape now than it was before?
Absolutely, but Queen G4 again, we see this desperation, but also very clever. I'm not even using desperation in like a negative way. It's correct to be desperate to trade queens here because Black also has some trumps in their position, and as the queens come off, they are going to come into play. Queen F2, unfortunately for White, doesn't get the job done because there's a knight D3.
Yeah, that four is going to be painful. Queen H2 just looks wrong. I mean,
But it was played. It was played. It does look wrong.
It's important to note Rook takes H6 is not a threat because Knight F3 is possible. The pawn on G2 is pinned. So you have some time to figure it out.
And I'm worried about those tactics because I think that now suddenly the tables are potentially turning on White. Rook D2 played. Now if we ever get to play Knight F3, if your Rook moves away on F4, we're going to have double coverage. Double pins. Rook E3 played. White wants to add protection to that F3 square, but something seems off here. I don't believe this for White.
I don't believe it either. Some kind of Rook G3 would be nice. So King H7. The knight on E5 is excellent. It is protecting F7, which is essential here. And one thing I want to add is the knight on C3 is the one white piece that's not doing its job. And the pawn on C6 dominates it because it can't get to D5. That pawn 3 squares away from a knight. You'll see it now that you've heard it, everybody who's watching, you'll remember it. You'll be like, wait, Robert told me that a pawn 3 squares from a knight is a good thing. And here, that is the case for sure. So what's going on here, though? Queen H4, I'm starting to worry Rook takes H6 check is coming with a mating net.
Good point. Yeah, Queen F6 and Queen G7 mate, and Queen H4 also. I think Rook D1 was a threat potentially for Black because we could maybe sacrifice an exchange and just enter your position, but Queen H4 gives you that H2 square. Rook E6 played, and now Queen F4 threatening Queen takes H6 mate. Wow. Let's see what can we do here as Black? Are we forced to take on F6? But then after Queen takes F6, you have the double attack on G7 mate and E5. Ooh. Wait a second, is Abdumalik going to get her first win here? Or is there some trick here for Black? Queen D4 check, does that do anything?
That's what I was looking at. She plays it at long left, but King H1 is important because King H2 actually would have lost the game, and I'll show that in a second. But King H1, it just means that when the Rook captures, now you take on D1, and then wait, this Queen takes H5 in this variation. So
yeah,
Queen F1, good move. But Queen takes Queen H5, this is Rook H3. Oh, okay, or this. No more checks. No more checks. So nerve-wracking position though. Oh, shit. Okay, I don't think this is how she wanted to defend because she just lost another pawn.
But there's also wait, S7's in take here. I'm sorry, it's not. Sorry. I thought the knight was gonna move, but wait a second. Rook H3. You've been dying for Rook H3 for a very long time.
But now it's back. Queen E1 Knight G4's mate. It's not even winning the queen's mate.
No.
Oh, I feel horrible. I mean, if we go back in that game, so there were it's like really painful to see things like that. But the moment with Queen D4 check was a good move, and she spent a lot of time before playing it. And the point was that this Rook on F6 can be captured, and now my queen is sort of staring at your queen through the knight. So King H2 would have been a blunder because Rook F6, Queen F6, there's Knight G4 check, and you have to move your Rook to take my knight, and then you lose your queen on F6. So what happened in the game was smart with King to H1, and what Lagno did was really smart from there to win this pawn H5. But Rook H3 right away, I think, would have been a done deal. At least I believe so. Where actually, it's more complicated than I'm giving credit. Rook at F6, Queen F6, Queen D1 check. Like this king still has to go on a journey, and there's Knight G4 check. Oh my gosh, maybe Lagno had this under control somehow tactically. Holy cow.
Yeah. Very impressive. A lot of tactics that were also played by instinct here. But we do have the Olga Guria Sarah Kadim match still underway as they're playing their last game of 3-minute chess. Knight F4 was just played by Sarah to protect that G2 pawn.
Yeah, that's a nice multi-purpose move, hitting the queen, protecting the pawn. I'm still not over the fact that Lagno saved that game and found these crazy tactics and showed the power of a knight on E5. But here, Queen B5 played by Olga Guria, which I think is a good move.
Black seems like they're doing great here, though. I mean, 2 bishops. If it's an endgame or a middle game, it looks like a very, very promising. I mean, the question is, do we have something for White that can somehow consolidate, maybe trade one of the bishops off? If I could do that, I'd be breathing a sigh of relief, but I don't see how to do it.
Yeah, and how about the extra time? For once, I'm looking at the clock. Every single game I've tuned into, I fail to look at the clock. It's the first thing I do. So there's an extra 40 seconds for Sarah, but it is the position, as you mentioned, with the bishops. The bishops are so strong here that black has to be better on the board. But with the time, do you still think black's better?
Oh, with the time, not clear, but Yuri has shown that she's able to play really quickly. Bishop C6 played. I have to say, okay, this is better than some of the lines I was looking at for white because at least she has that active rook. She's got to make look though, and she chose to make it with the H4.
Mm-hmm.
We saw H5 quickly by Gira, and now Rook B6 and Knight D6. Good, good. White is getting some activity. I like that.
Much needed. Now F7 pawn's under attack. Uh-oh. Bishop E5 is a great move, hitting both knights. So you
Oh,
can
nice.
win the F7 pawn, but you lose F4.
Oh, okay. And now she's taken on F4, but there goes the two bishops. I mean, that's most of our advantage. Now can't we just play like Knight C7, try to reroute to D5, and white's fine?
Yeah, Knight C7, the one thing you have to watch out for is a back rank checkmate. So Rook
Yeah.
C8, Rook C1. So
We'd have to throw in G3 somewhere. I mean, maybe that's why she's thinking here. She's thinking about whether she needs to interpolate a G3 move. But then her pawn structure would be wounded, so maybe she'd be a little worse.
wait,
So
but
she just played Knight D4.
same problem though. Rook D8, you're getting mated on D1, and Rook to B4, there's just Bishop to E5. So she plays G3. So I think actually there was more venom in the position than we initially gave credit for. And you liked black's position from the start. So I should actually say than I gave credit for, because I thought that white should be able to weasel her way out. But now we're in a position just up 2 pawns, and you called to Jennifer that those bishops were too devious.
Yeah, they were. And I think maybe the incarnation that I missed at first was better because in that one, I think we would have only lost one pawn. But either way, yeah, this is 2 pawns for black, and she's gonna win, and then it's gonna be an equal match, Robert. That's what we want.
You know, it's a good comeback for Olga Giria. There's some chances still to hold this game despite being down several pawns, but not now. Because now you can play pawn to A2, and this is a really instructive endgame. So I hope that she put a king on A2, which wasn't necessary in this particular position, but this is winning endgame and actually quite easy to win now with the pawn starting to promote.
Yeah, it helps that we have another pawn on the other side, so we don't have to be as accurate.
Right.
That's always nice. What's the easiest way here?
Yeah, just don't blunder the check behind losing the pawn. So here we go, and now it's just simple.
Yeah, we got the extra rook and the game, and we've got a tied match.
Wow, wow, wow. Tied match here. This game is about to be canceled. I'm going to show that endgame just very quickly because I do think it's instructive for some people who are, especially learners in the maybe 1,000 to 1,600 range, because you're often told don't put your pawn on A2 because then the rook will give you checks forever and you can't actually help your pawn promote. But in this game, she could have retreated her king. And the point is that in this position, the white king is stuck to the two squares G2 and H2. If your king comes to F3, I just give you a check and promote my pawn. I'm freeing my pawn, which I can't normally do because if I move my rook, I lose the pawn directly. But so if the king comes off the second rank, I give a check and promote. If your king comes to F2, there's rook H1, which says, okay, I'm threatening to promote, so you have to take my pawn so it doesn't promote, and then I have the skewer rook H2 check, winning the rook behind it. That means the king has to stay on these two squares, but because I have this F pawn, no matter what you do, like let's say you just sit and wait, I can play F3 and I finally distract your king, and your king has to make a choice of do I take it on F3, in which case there's rook F1 check, or do I move to the side, in which case the pawn now promotes in the F file. So that's actually just strategically one position, theoretically winning, even without the other F pawn here. But it's good to just see these ideas unfold so that in your future games you can use them. So
Absolutely. Incredibly instructive endgame, Robert. And the fun thing about this endgame is if it wasn't for the F pawns, if you just had, 2 pawns on the H file, it would be a draw actually. So that's why we warn people not to push that pawn so fast. But here we can because we have the F pawn to distract and get you that skewer. Love that endgame.
yeah, I just removed the F pawns by sacrificing them. This would have been a draw, as Jennifer's pointing out, because the king would love to help the pawn promote. However, white can check the king from behind and then just I'll show that on not yet. Just rook back here, rook here. And when the king attaches itself to the pawn, you give a check to force the king away. and then you make sure that you check the king away from the pawn, and then put your rook behind it, because once the king comes all the way back, you just say, your rook can't move. It's stuck here. I can just move my rook back and forth in the A file, and my king back and forth H2 and G2. No progress to be made without giving away your A2 pawn. So on that note, Jennifer, we should take a break. I know I want to stretch my legs a little bit. We'll back in a few minutes with more FIDE Chess.com Women's Speed Chess Championship coverage. And we return with more action here in the Women's Speed Championship. Jennifer, we have a tied match now between Olga Giria and Sara Kadem. So let me ask you, Sara won the first two games. Olga has won the last two games. There are many people who believe in the hot hand, even though there are plenty of people who dispute that it exists or not. What do you think? Is it a hot hand situation? Should we now favor Olga Giria in that matchup? Wait, can't hear Jennifer.
I'll fix that for you. Hello. Sorry about that, Robert.
I was like, wait, is it only me? Am I the only person who can't hear her? No, there we go. Sorry, what were you saying?
Well, I think the break kind of helps cool off the hot hand, or more importantly, it allows the person who was getting crushed by the hot hand to relax and reconvene. So I just think this is going to be a super close match. I'm going to go out on a limb and predict that we're going to get an even score going into the bullet. That's my wild prediction.
Well, that's actually a really hard thing to predict because we don't know how many games we'll see in the 3+1. It's where you get the most games because there's 30 minutes of this time control. And predicting a level match, well, I couldn't be so bold myself, but I don't know who I would favor. So maybe it's a good cop out. That way you don't have to make a choice.
Well, no, but I'm not giving even odds. I'm not saying like 50% of the time there's going to be an even score. I just like that prediction. That's my vision. But let's pop into the game as we've got another Radisson defense. And let's see what's going on here. Bishop E6 just played. I'm wishing I had some tactic to move my knight from C3 and play rook C6 and queen takes B4. Doesn't work. There was no good discoveries. A3 just played instead, and now bishop D6.
Yeah, so the bishop retreats to D6, where this configuration of bishop and pawn, I call it the ice climbers based on the Super Smash characters, but they protect each other and they make each other better. And it's just annoying. This bishop is always defending C7, so your rook on C1, it looks good. You're on a semi-open file, but it's not actually doing as much as you might think or as much as you would like. So I think that for now, Black's position is sturdy, and I would consider how to play over on the king side eventually. I have the bishop pair. I'm the only one with a dark square bishop, so I would like, and there it is, G5.
Ooh,
I knew she was going to do it.
Aggressive move. It's a move that a lot of people are told not to play when they're kids, right? They're said, don't move your pawns in front of your king like that. But it's all about the specifics of the position. And in this case, there's no white pieces hovering around your king. And not only are they not hovering, but there's really no kind of like anchor squares where you can imagine like, oh, white could set this up against my king. To the contrary, black's probably going to play knight G6 at some point, and that's going to further hold up those weaknesses.
Yeah, and B5 I think is a good idea by Olga Giria because when you're getting attacked, there is a very common thing that happens in chess where you play on the opposite side of the board because if you can create problems for black on the queen side or in the center, now the attention shifts. Instead of strictly being focused on the king side, you have to now look over there to the other side of the board. So B6 played, C6 run, and I think that white wants a strategic play of knight to C5, but I'm more concerned about the situation G4. I feel like black's progress is very easy to see unfold, and white's like initiative, if you want to call it that, isn't entirely clear to me. I mean, you attacked B7, I protected it, and now what?
Yeah, I see what you mean. I feel like the problem with B6 is that we don't have the option to break open the position anymore. So knight D3 was played, looking to occupy the E5 square.
But this loses a pawn, or it sacrifices a pawn, I should say, because black just scoops it up. And if we take on E5, queen takes E5, is black's king vulnerable? Is that the claim that with this pawn all the way on G4, black's best move, next move would be pawn G7? But you can't do that. And she won a pawn, so it's not like she can complain about her position being overextended. But here's rook D1, here's rook D4. Jennifer, the king safety element is one that we talk about a lot in blitz chess. How unsafe do you think black's king is, or is it totally fine and you should be just thrilled to be up a pawn?
I think you should be pretty thrilled to be up a pawn. There's just not enough pieces. Like, give me a knight. Give me some circles that I can play with. some tricky pieces to play with. We just got the light squared bishop. I just don't think it's enough.
Yeah, you want that bishop to go to C3, and then you're saying, yep, no, I'll take white for sure. And that's the thing, is the position is weak on the dark squares for black, but you don't have a dark square bishop. And so she plays rook H8. That was an interesting choice. Is she just going for a rook lift, like rook H6, rook G or F6? Is that the plan here? Otherwise, I don't really understand rook H8.
Yeah, and there it is. She did decide to do that because H4 we wouldn't want to play because the pawn on G4 would be hanging. Rook F4 now preventing, well, not preventing rook F6 because she played it anyway. But preventing it from being as powerful.
Yeah, it's like pretending to prevent it because now after queen takes f6, one of the things that white was throwing was queen e7, and maybe she should have went queen e7 instead of rook f4. But if white is not able to put pressure on this b7 pawn, for example, you are now absolutely down a pawn, and in comes bishop e4. Oh gosh, like is black going to somehow get an attack here with an eventual h4 and push, push, push?
Yes, I think that's on her agenda. Absolutely. Note also the time discrepancy here. Sarah's got an extra minute on the clock. Bishop f5 played queen c7. She's trying to make up for that time. Bishop g6. Okay, bishop f1. Now, how about that rook on a8 though? Come on, let's invite them to the party.
Yeah, I guess the a5 pawn requires the rook's defense for the time being, but you're right. We need to get that rook active. So how do we do that? Do we play a4, but we'll have the same problem where the rook will be tied down? And from white's point of view, if I got a free move now, I'm thinking of queen d6. And queen d6, I just went queen d5. I was trying to go queen d6. But queen d6, getting into the dark squares, that feels like something that white really wants to achieve.
Well, instead, it looks like Sarah's put her queen on b2 and queen e7 played by Olga. Man, she's defending really well. Props to her, especially with so little time. I feel like she's really trying her best here to hold on and create some problems for black because, again, you do have to watch out for your squares, your f6. Okay, she's just taking the pawn on b6. I thought that white would have some kind of ideas here, but maybe nothing quite works
Well,
because,
bishop
rook f7, queen g5 check, you just run.
I think bishop d3 now is a threat, but she wanted to create some love for her king before she did that. And queen b2 is bishop d3. Uh-oh.
Been played. That was her idea. Thinking
Uh-oh.
that if you take on d3, f7 is now a huge problem. And you can't play rook f8 because then bishop g6 wins, king g6, queen takes f8. What can you do?
She's going to king h8 and try to play bishop to h7. That's her idea now.
Okay.
Wait, but actually throwing him the check on a1 was bad because now you would have had queen to b1 with check here. But now that the king's already on g2, you're going to play queen b1 and defend your bishop. But then
Queen
there's
e5
queen e5. Wait,
check.
there's queen e5, so it's mate.
Queen e5, yeah. Queen e5 and queen g7 is mating. So there's no defense. She had to play queen g7 and give up her queen.
Oh man, that's obviously not what she wanted here, and it could be a tilt factor now. With this will be third straight win for Ogugiria if she's able to convert this, which she should, as she has an extra queen for just a queen and a pawn for a rook and a bishop.
Oh yeah, she'll convert this. That H pawn's coming up the board.
Oh, it certainly is. And the G pawn might join the party as well. So just don't
Wow,
get
that
checkmated for white. That's the one thing.
whoa, H6 played. Now we're threatening queen e5. And there it is, queen e5 and queen g7. She's gonna resign. Wow, what a game. What a game. That defense was quite something. And Sarah at some point just lost her sense of danger as she was on top all game. But Olga managed to weave something together.
I'm going to pull that one up just quickly because I think that queen a1 check was the imprecise move. And it's hard to not play a move with check in a blitz game, but you have the same exact idea where after queen h5, bishop h7, but the difference is after rook f7 in this variation is you have time to play queen b1 check. And at the very least, you can go to e4 with another check, but you can bring your queen to g6 as well, safeguarding your king over here, protecting the bishop on h7. So it was a missed opportunity there for Sarah by giving a check in advance. You want to save that check, and it caused her defeat. So let's keep on going in this matchup. We'll go to the next game, where it's a calm start to the game at least. What does Sarah need to do? How does she right the ship, Jennifer?
Win this game. I mean, that's what she has to do, even if that score. But what an instructive moment, Robert, as we do warn people from, just giving a check just because it's there, right? Similar concept to how people often want to force things. They want to trade pieces just because they can. But you actually have to assess whether it's good for you. But I have to say that that's some complicated stuff. The variations are not super easy to see when you're down to seconds on the clock.
Oh, it's really hard. And it's kind of a trial and error experience where sometimes you do want to give the check first, but when you're defending, you want to make sure that you are saving your king. But the queen a1 check actually didn't do anything different than when the queen was on b2. So you actually helped white push the king forward, and that is entirely what led to her downfall. And what was great defense by her, great play, and it's really unfortunate for her. But I think she can build on that. She can say, you know what, I played a good game and I had that game in the bag, if not for a one move blunder. The issue I would say is you don't have time to recover. So she may not even know that she was better at that point. She like was moving so quickly that queen b1 check is something that you see in analysis, but during the game and then right after, you're not immediately thinking, oh, how could I miss queen to b1? You're just on to the next one. So I think that here in this game, I already like Black's position, Jennifer. It seems like
Me too. I mean, look at those imposing knights on g4 and e4. And by the way, we're not that interested in just taking on f2 unless we can also take on e3. So that's the point of this last move, rook e8. Now knight f2 could be a serious threat. Rook f2, knight f2, king f2. It's not about trading off those two beautiful knights for a rook and two pawns. It's about also getting the chance to play queen takes e3 check,
right.
and rip the position open.
It's a very good point. And rook 88 is useful. It's instead of committing to the decision of giving up the knights for the rook and some pawns, which you could have done a move ago, just to show that like after rook e2, you can hit knight e takes f2, rook f2, queen takes e3. But I think that she dismissed this because of any queen move, queen e2, queen e1, queen e2. And once we get these massive exchanges here, we're in an end game with two minor pieces with rooks on the board. There are a lot of things happening here. I think it's good for the minor pieces. Whereas Jennifer, you discussed correctly that when it's just a single rook against two pieces without all this other stuff, the rook with the pawns can start, pressing those pawns forward and outclass the minor pieces in a way that they can't when there are so many pieces on the board.
Absolutely. And it's a tricky situation. There is that direct threat now. So like if white plays something, silly, like just makes a random move, knight f2 is definitely on the board. So white has to stop that in some way. And not by something like h3, because that won't help, right? Then we will just use that knight to take on f2. No, we actually have to shore up like the e3 or the f2 pawn, right? But all these moves are so passive. Like I don't want to play queen f1 or, I mean, maybe I have to play something like queen f1 or queen d3, just to protect the e3 pawn.
Yeah, it's a good point as well that h3 just creates a new weakness. It's all about the dark squares right now. So h3 makes g3 weaker. You say, there's no risk. My pawn g3 is protected by another pawn. You need to think every time you make a move, what has changed? And the pawn h3 attacks a knight, but it loosens the defense of the g3 pawn. So I'm with you that a careless move can just end in the game pretty quickly, unfortunately, if some people want to play h3. Instead, I would be a little calmer, knight to d1, maybe extra defensive, protecting e3, protecting f2. I know it looks bad, Jennifer. I don't like it. And knight e5 was actually played here, but actually, maybe that works. I thought that you were just sacrificing a pawn like in the other game, but it might not be a sacrifice because c7 is the target at the end of the line. Wow, that's interesting.
Oh, you're saying, yeah, that, there's so many different trades and that eventually, c7 falls. So this could be a really great move, knight e5.
Yeah, one that's hard, I would say, for most people to see, ourselves included, because knight e5, I was looking at knight d1, I was looking at the passive move, but knight e5 may be a brilliant, aggressive defensive move. That sounds kind of like an oxymoron, but it's defending and shoring up your king by trading some pieces. And at the end of the line, the rooks on the c file will make their presence felt. So Jennifer, that looks to me now like quite a good move.
A brilliant move. And, this shows this instinct for liquidation that strong players have when they're getting attacked. You look at a move like, a lot of people don't look at a move like knight e5 because it just seems ridiculous, but she sees that potential of harnessing the energy of her pieces that are actually really not been harnessed at all. The rooks, the bishop on b2. This move, as things get traded off, you see all that hidden power of them. So knight takes c3 played instead. Now, what's going on here? If bishop takes c3, knight e5, pawn e5, bishop e5, and again, it's that c pawn that we get to capture at the end of the variation, which saves us.
I think the problem for most players is that they think about defending by directly defending the square. They don't think necessarily about defending by attacking something else that keeps a piece or certain pieces stuck to the defensive said pawn. For here, it's like c7. And I think what Black is doing is great right now. Giria is trying to reroute her pieces over to the h file, and she's not taking on g3 just yet. Because if we take on g3 too early, perhaps that gives white the opportunity to escape. So she's leaving the tension there, saying, you're never going to take me on h4. That just opens up my bishop to the h2 square. And, well, actually, the time trouble, I'm like, rook f3. Jennifer, it looks good for Black to me, but this is a position I can see in time trouble going really wrong.
Rook f3, I gotta love it. Pawn takes f3, queen h3 is the idea, but she's played queen d3, looking to go to f1. This is like a mirror of another game where she used her fianchettoed queen to stop a brutal attack from Olga Yuria. She's got some defensive skills, but
Oh,
no, she
oh,
forgot.
bishop
Oh,
e1. We
bishop e1.
forgot.
Yes, the rook on c2, defense as well.
Bishop takes
Beautiful.
g3. She had bishop takes g3 there. She missed it. I mean, she has no time. But bishop takes g3 would have blasted out the position. Now she's
No, queen f4, mouse slip. Is she meant to go
oh.
queen e4, I take it. But yo, Robert, I mean, 3-3. I mean, I know that clock's not out yet, but my prediction is at least not going to be ridiculous.
Yeah, your prediction is not ridiculous at all. And actually, this is a very back and forth match. I want to bring up that game very quickly just once more, because once this bishop went to e1, went to f2 and queen h3, it wasn't that she missed the checkmate. It's that we missed the defense because we forgot that the bishop could retreat. But still here, after rook f2, she had to take on g3. It's winning completely for black. After bishop takes g3, you're ripping the king open, but she had no time. Look at the clock, 3.4 seconds. She made another move and then quickly lost the game. So it was a time that told the story here. So let's go back to the live game that we have.
Because it's another really interesting one, although queens just came off the board, but it's that same variation that we had earlier in the match where we like white's position, but black is more solid and then it might at first appear.
Very true. And I wondered if during the break they took a moment to look into these lines, because you're repeating them and you don't want to repeat something unless you're certain that it worked the first time. And I think we can get deceived by results. Let's say we win a game in some opening variation, but oh no, that opening variation, yeah, that's good. I feel good about that. But we don't like look as close as we would if we had lost the game in the opening. So it's important not to just get too complacent with your opening choices. And I personally like white's position here because I think that the control of the squares is h rook coming to c1. Yes, this knight can come to d4, but what next? I just took over the c file. I can play f3 at any moment. I prefer white's position and white's pawn structure.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also think you're totally right. And it's a really instructive thing, you know. The great thing about studying games that you won or that you played well in is that you don't have as much emotional trauma of having like maybe blundered or lost. So sometimes you can even learn more. Like that. That's why the cliche about like learning most from your losses, I don't necessarily agree with it, Robert.
I really like that way to think about it because I'm with you. I really do believe that once, especially younger students, so like kids in particular, they win a game, they feel like, why do I have to look at that game I won? But chess isn't just about the result because you can actually play terribly and win a game, and you can play extremely well and then blunder a tactic at the end of the game and lose. So that's why I actually ask my students. I don't say, how did you do? I said, how did you play? Because that way they have to be descriptive to me about what they thought and like their emotions in that game and sort of just like what was it like rather than just I can see the result. I can go and look up the result. Anybody can do that. But that doesn't tell, did you feel comfortable in the game? Did that opening suit your style? Do you feel like you need to change something? And that's why I think descriptive language is really important in chess. And that's why I try to do so in my commentary as well. Instead of just saying the position is dead equal, which I know some people, we fall into those traps. It's more important to say, hey, we have a position here with 2 minor pieces and 6 pawns aside, but white's pawn structure is better. These double pawns don't look great. I see maybe down the line, there's a potential for white to go king f3, king g4, king h5, king h6. I know that seems far-fetched, but that could be possible in some universe. So, Jennifer, I don't know what you make of this end game, but I certainly prefer white's position
Yeah, the situation for black being that you've got a lot of weaknesses and b5 actually potentially create even more, right? Because there's now that b5 pawn that you have to watch as well. Yeah, and f5 was just played by Olga. Where do you want to rest that knight? Do you think if you play knight c5, that this endgame will be totally drawn?
here. Ooh, so I guess it has that potential because the white king is going to have trouble getting in.
Yeah,
But
but I
here
don't
it
know
comes.
though.
Exactly what I was saying.
Because we couldn't play h5 because then you reroute your bishop to attack the pawn and you could put your king on h4, right? So she felt compelled to go for the more passive route of using her king to defend against h6. But
And
now can we play like g4 and h4?
we want to accomplish that, but the problem is that once we play g4, g5, black will capture everything. The white king will land on g5, and immediately black plays f6, replaces that first pawn, and then shuts the king out. So it will be a draw, I imagine, because where's this king coming back to? There's no square of axes.
Well, I know we're paying attention primarily to this match, but because unfortunately for Abdumalik, she's actually down 6-0 right now. But if you want to peek into that game real quick, it just looks like super fun.
Whoa, whoa, and that's the great thing, honestly, about lopsided matchups is you often get really crazy games because either someone is resigned in the match overall, or they're just like, oh, what's the difference? I lose 7-0, I lose 6-0. It's no real difference. I think that Lagno is winning because she's about to promote her pawn, and this pawn on b2 is not quite as good as the one on g7. Yeah, this is just an excellent position here for
No,
Lagno.
yeah, it's too strong, too strong. We've got advantages on both sides of the board. Knight on c5 coming, g8 equals queen is sometimes a problem as well. This is really bad news for Abdumalik, and sadly, she's going to go down to 7-0. And this has to be a hot hand. I mean, look at this blitz rating of Abdumalik. It was clearly like 2650 or 2660 to start the day, and she's lost all these points in this match. This is just weird. This is a case where she's definitely on tilt.
And she had this happen to her in the first Grand Prix when she played against Anna Ushanina. She lost that match really by a lopsided score. So I think that she is a player in particular. Maybe it's her competitive nature. Maybe it's the boxing background that she also does. That she's going for the fight. And I'm not trying to make a really cheesy sports analogy, but some people do this where if they're down 2 games in the match, instead of just saying I need to make a draw, they go into this mindset: I need to get a win. And if I don't get a win now, it's over. Whereas other people say, and I've heard plenty of coaches say this: if you lose 2 games in a row in a tournament, just make a draw in the next game. Just like make sure that you get on the scoreboard. But it's a different mentality for different players. And unfortunately for her, she's not getting on the scoreboard, even though she's more than capable of going toe to toe with Kateryna Lagno. And credit to Lagno, playing an excellent match overall and really just cruising.
Yeah, knight c4, king c7 play. How's she gonna just twist the knife in here? I mean, what is the knockout blow? She's played knight a5, looking to just, let's see, is there a rook b7 here?
That's what I'm looking for.
Maybe she's more vicious. She's actually trying to get rid of that bishop on e4 first. But bishop e4 does actually threaten bishop takes b1. So there is one threat in the position. The thing is, after rook b7, you do have to give up both of your rooks, right? So that's why she's not that keen on playing that way.
I would do that and then push my h pawn all the way to h6 and then move my bishop out the way, and just it's like a very straightforward win, and there's nothing black can do about it because all black's pieces are tied down. Oh, she moves her rook. She wants to go for checkmate. She doesn't want to give up the rooks for the queen. She's going for more here, but sometimes going for more, I say, is going for less. Here, I think white is still doing so well, and c5 is coming at some point. Queen e5, probably a good move, all things considered, but
what about queen e3 though? Oh, okay. She did trade off and just played knight c5, threatening knight takes e6 check. Oof. Knight to g8. Okay, so we have bishop g8 and knight e6. So maybe that's just the easiest.
Yeah. Just that kind of day for Zhansaya here.
Yikes. And now rook d2 is going to force resignation because you would play rook takes d8 and make a queen. And that is 7-0 for Kateryna Lagno. But let's go back to the super close match, which is tied up 3.5, with what looks like probably 2 games to go. Is that right? Yeah, 2 games to go. Oh, maybe just 1. It's going to be close. Could be 1, could be 2. Probably 2.
If this is a super long endgame, we'll only get 1, but this is looking like we'll get 2. And white is up a pawn in this position. So it's another one of these positions where I think if you just threw the player, the average spectator, into the game, they would say, wait, white's better. White's up a pawn. And they're counting the material first. And it is important to know what material exists on the board, but I don't see it as being anywhere clear for an advantage for white. I think that white should be better, but how much better is white even better is a difficult question to answer because look at how active black is. White has lacking development on the king side. Here comes rook b6 check, which tries to win the pawn on c3, which is already targeted twice by black's pieces. So I actually think that here, rook b6 check, aren't you just stealing the c3 pawn back if you want it? I mean, this is a good example of how initial looks can be a bit deceiving.
Yeah, that's true. We're going to be forced away, and then you get to take on c3. And hey, I mean, if this endgame is played well, we might go to a 4-4 score, and then a game point to see who's going to take the edge going into the bullet. But based on how they've been playing so far, who do you give the edge to in the bullet? Because in some ways, it feels like Olga plays even better in her last seconds, but she also gets into time pressure more often. So I can't decide.
And those are the like most annoying ones to predict, right? It's like, oh, 1%'s always in time trouble. But then you're like, they always play well in time trouble. It's like the Sasha Grishuk effect, where
Exactly.
we ever see his game, we're like, oh my god, Sasha, he's gonna be down to 8 seconds left. But he plays the best darn chess with 8 seconds left. Like these players are capable. So I think that Olga Gira, as you said, has proven that she can handle minimal time on her clock. But gosh, I don't know. I'm going to pick somebody. I'm going to say that Olga is the favorite in the bullet. I don't know that for certain. I'm just going with gut instinct right
Yeah, well, beating the women's world champion in that format certainly gives some credence to your claim. You can also actually look at their bullet rating soon. Sometimes that gives you a clue as well.
although sometimes people don't play too much bullet. So, and usually when you play bullet, it's 1-0 rather than with a 1 second increment. So I think that the number next to the player's name can be adjusted sometimes with that extra second. And maybe in the future, I don't know, you can consider different ratings for a different increment. It's weird, right? Like 3+1 time control versus 3+2. The standard
Yeah.
FIDE time control is 3+2, but that's an extra second per move played, and it just changes the entire nature of the game. So
Yeah, it is true, Robert, that like the 1 second increment, because it stops you from just getting like pure flagged in like a queen versus pawn situation, right? So yeah, it takes some tactics out of the game for the players who are really good at the speed demon stuff. But that said, is this one going to be a draw? Because knight f4 was just played. They both have about the same amount of time on the clock. Does anyone have an edge here?
so white has the extra pawn from the E through the H file. Black has an extra pawn on the B file on the queen side. But I think that because there's still some king safety issues, and I think white's king is safe. I know that the king has no moves, but it's relatively safe. The black king now has an H7 to push to the side of the board, and white goes rook to D1, taking over an open line. I would prefer to have white's position because I think the pieces are slightly better coordinated. And you already see if rook takes D6, knight takes D6, that hits F7 and B7. I feel like just somehow white's position, there are no weak pawns that can be attacked just yet. And that's why I slightly prefer the position for white, even though I acknowledge that black should be okay here.
Yeah, and you've got that knight on f5. We love that piece.
We do.
D6
Sure.
played knight e3. Ooh, coming over to d5. But I also don't forget about black. Black can try to sink a knight or a rook into d4.
True. And that's the essential question. So does black want to trade rooks? Does black want to keep the rooks on the board? I mean, rook d4 is a big question coming up for black.
Yeah. Okay, does knight d5 do anything here though? Maybe not enough. Black decided to just play bishop to c4 instead, stopping me from having control over that d4 square.
And also weirdly limiting this rook. A3 sort of traps the rook. You can go rook to b6, but then I trade rooks on b6, and all of a sudden you're left with a compromised pawn structure. So a3 there, it's played, and rook b6 is the only way to keep the material equality.
All right, rook b6, pawn b6. Our pawns got doubled.
And knight d5 check actually was a possibility there, but she's keeping the knights on the board. Probably is smart to keep the knights on g3 and knight d5 check. You win the b6 pawn. Now this is Sarah's
Oh,
taking
Sarah's
it.
getting it. Yes. Oh, she did not take it right away. Um, that could have been a mistake. Bishop
Yeah.
c6 now.
Knight g4 check and then knight e5. Just bring your king in. Because black has these double pawns, try to make use of the. She was knight d5. Wow, that's not a move I was expecting. Knight
Oh,
e5
look
now.
at the b7 pawn. There is that b7 pawn. What are you trying to play? Knight e5, hitting me back.
Then
Okay,
knight
but
f3 check.
yeah, you're gonna win the h pawn. Oh, she decides to go passive because she thought that the race between the h and the queenside pawns would favor white.
And Jennifer, I'm going to point out the bishop on d5 does not match the h8 square. So black knows what she needs to accomplish. Get rid of the a pawn, sacrifice your knight for the e pawn, you make a draw. If you can accomplish that, here's knight c4, good move, and you lose
She
the
knows.
e5 pawn.
She's keeping track.
Wait, but the king's on g7 already. No, oh gosh. The H pawn's too strong now. Knight G4,
Knight
Bishop
G4.
F3.
Oh, you have Bishop F3, Knight F6.
Okay, she takes that. And somehow this feels like B3 is coming.
We stick the knight on F6. Oh, and we just play Knight H5. Okay, and the game is drawn. She just has to make sure to offer that draw. Wait, Sarah. I think that was a slip or something, a mouse slip. Of course, she meant to accept that draw, and we're still at an even score, 4-4.
And this game gets off with 4 seconds on the match clock. So no, this game should count. I was pretty sure there was some time left on the clock. Maybe I'm misreading it, but
I'm not sure. Let's check. Let's check because maybe there was some. I guess it looks like they're going to reply quickly. As let's also check in and see what's going on as Kateryna and Abdumalik are playing one final game. I just want my crazy prediction to be right because I'm like I called it. I was like, there's going to be exactly equal at the end of the match, Robert. Going into 1 minute. But Abdumalik, is she going to get anything on the board against Kateryna? Let's see.
Yeah, so what is happening here? We have a position where, wow, it's like so many pieces. Only one pawn has been traded, though to my eyes initially, I was like, oh, there must have been some trades. Then I'm looking, wait, all the pieces are there. I see 2 knights, I see 2 bishops, 2 rooks. It's a cluttered position. Whose side do you prefer here? I'm worried about the F7 pawn, but that's and the A6 pawn. Those are the 2 concerns I have for Black's position. But do you think that White's better here, or is Black doing all right?
I like playing White here because I have more experience with it. I do play these positions sometimes with the white pieces, and yeah, that nice pressure on the F pawn as well as the A pawn. But I know that Black has plenty of ideas up their sleeve as well. But I would rather be White.
And now I'm looking at bishop takes h3 because I was so focused on f7 and a6. I'm like, wait, this queen and bishop, what are they doing here? They're lined up pretty perfectly to take on h3 at some moment. Is now that moment? That's a big question. So she does play queen to d3 after knight h5, just making sure that she keeps her king side more protected and attack the a6 pawn in the process. I like that multi-purpose move, queen d3.
And by the way, we have received confirmation that the Sarah and Kadim and Olga Yuria match has the 3-minute portion has been completed. There was a buzzer just a couple seconds. And, I was joking about how Sarah was going to agree to the draw and why did she decline the draw offer? And I guess that was it. She probably was looking.
Yeah.
Right?
So you think that Sarah believes she's the favorite in the bullet? Because that's essentially what you're saying is she maybe didn't want to play another 3-minute game.
Maybe. And then also consider the fact that it gives them probably like a much longer break. Probably gives them like an extra 5-minute break. So maybe she wants to just like relax a little bit and like plan her openings.
That's actually probably the most useful thing because the players will get a break after this game concludes. And she gets a little head start on that break and can relax, go over the openings, as you said, because Bullet has a unique set of openings, whereas you may not see the players continue playing their normal stuff. They may play B3 on the first one. That's the Hikaru Nakamura special, where you're just playing a bunch of quick moves, and you may feel like an opening that would not work very well in a longer time control because it maybe doesn't have as much bite to it. And if your opponent plays correctly, which when you have more time, you're more likely to play correctly, it's not working out for you. But in a bullet game, you just go all in, like bam, bam, bam. You can't cover the tactics quickly enough. So I think we may see a change in openings, and that is a good point, Jennifer. That could be what the players are looking to do, is just take a break, look over some new stuff, and get ready for what will be a very nerve-wracking bullet portion.
Absolutely. And then, by the way, Rook F1 just played by Kateryna, and she's announcing her intention. She's making it very clear. I am going to play F4 and try to checkmate you. And, the idea of getting that Rook F1 into the open line, it does so many things, right? It allows us to threaten things like Bishop H6 and also eye the F7 pawn. So this move G5 was just played, but gosh, I don't like this for Black.
Yeah, it's one of those moves where you can never take it back, and it does sub f4, but it creates a new set of weaknesses for you, in particular the f5 square, some the light squares on the king side, and Black just lacks space. That's what's really bothering me about the position, is where am I going to get that space? And she plays knight h5. That's a pretty good answer to the question. is perhaps his knight's coming to f4 next, and okay, I can buy that.
Yeah, I like that. And by the way, I wasn't specifically saying that I hated G5. I'm saying I like White's position.
Oh, yeah, I didn't think you were calling that move out as being bad. It just, I have a visceral reaction to G5. It's like, ooh, that to me scares me because of the permanence. Like the F5 square can now never be really owned by black unless you fill the square with your pawn. But that in and of itself is a very risky move.
So knight f4, instinctually, I capture that because I'm worried about like bishop h3 type stuff. But Kateryna doesn't feel like those things are dangerous enough, and she takes her time, figuring, there's always going to be bishop f4 later.
Yeah, I actually thought there was some knight takes g2 sort of tactics available to black, and probably a missed opportunity. And with such little time on her clock and the match score the way it is, I feel like Zhansaya doesn't trust her calculation right now. She may just go for it for the sake of going for it because she's already lost this match, but I don't think she's really feeling confident about her chess, and it's hard to. And this happens to all of us. I've lost many games. I remember. Well, I'll finish talking about this game itself, and then I can talk about the point about personal experience.
Queen c6. That's a great move. Oh my God, we're bringing her good luck. Is she going to win her first game of the match?
I think she's got it.
She's taking the bishop on c5 more than a pawn. Queen b3 threatens f7, but it's easily defended. Okay. Rook takes c7. We didn't want that to happen, but
she lost f7. Oh, Jennifer, I'm not going to call you a jinx, but
wait, are we losing though yet? Wait, g3. Oh wait, what's going on?
Queen f5. Queen f5 is leading to mate.
No, this is sad. I can't believe it. I mean,
so
gosh.
Remember the time you told me you didn't believe in the commentator's curse? And then can you tell me what just happened there?
It was just random chance. I said she's definitely gonna win now, and 3 moves later she got mated.
And the point was after Queen b7, which was a great move by Kateryna. She's hitting the rook, she's hitting the pawn here. Rook f8 was a safe move, just protecting f7 preemptively, because you're losing c7, and it's all about this f7 square. So I was going to make a point that I played a tournament many years ago now because I'm just not so active anymore, but I lost it was a round robin tournament, 11 games. I lost the first 5 games I had with the white pieces, and I was doing decently with black. I think it was like 3 out of 5 with black or something, or 3.5 out of 5 with black, and I was 0 out of 5 with white. So I know what it's like to just like not be able to do anything right in a tournament. And so I feel for Zhansaya completely here. This is just not her day. She's going to have to forget about it, move on. And well, we're going to move on to our last break, because when we return, we will have the bullet portion, and we have a tied matchup between Sara Kadem and Olga Giria. You will not want to miss the conclusion of that one. We'll be right back. And we really needn't say much more than the fact that this score is even between Sarah Kadem and Olga Giria. One last time, I'll ask you, Jennifer, are you still sticking with your pick? What do you think is going to happen in the bullet portion of this match?
Wow. I think we're going to go to a tie break.
You're all about the ties. You're about the your extra chess, the free chess. The fans deserve it. Oh man, if we get a tie break, I'm going to be sweating even more than I already feel like I am by the time it's over.
You're gonna get hungry, yeah, yeah. Well, hungry for some good chess. But my pick was Olga, and I'll stick with that. But gosh, they're both playing so well. Just trading blows here.
It's funny because typically we talk about matchup between approximately equally rated players, but like, oh, it's a toss up. This really has felt like that. Sometimes, even though the score is even, it feels like one player has been a bit dominant and just hasn't been able to convert. The match has really felt level from start to finish. First, Sarah had the lead, then Olga won 3 straight games, then Sarah evened the score up. So it's been a game of mini matchups, mini streaks. But now we're at the bullet, and we'll see what's going to happen. Let's go right to this matchup here. Olga gets white.
All right, we got another Fian Kettle. Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the Abdumalik game, but let's stick with Sarah. We've got another Ragozin. Am I pronouncing that right? I feel like it's a strange word.
Yeah, I've always heard Ragozin, but I don't know if that means that I've just heard it from Americans who aren't used to the word itself. So I'm never sure I'm right either.
And it's named after a chess grandmaster.
Right.
Vyacheslav Ragozin. I think you're right. It's Ragozin.
And for instance, like the Pirts, everyone in the U.S. growing up called it the Pirk, right, or the Perk, but it's like the Pirts. And I'm like, okay, that's good to know. I always like to pronounce people's names correctly. And actually, watch out here for D takes C4 and B5. So she played C5.
She played C5. So that's a move that we don't often see in these queen pawn openings because usually you like to keep the tension. But in this case, with that bishop on E6, playing C5 made a lot of sense, just trying to shut it down.
Very true. And I just saw in the chat, somebody asked, did they lose 200 rating each? It's because it's now bullet. So their bullet ratings are not as high as their blitz rating, which often is the case for players who generally stick to blitz chess and not so much bullet. So this pawn on C6, Jennifer, that looks like a weakness. And if I am Olga, I'm trying to figure out how do I pile up on it. But I know that black can play B4 at some point soon as well because the pawn A3 is pinned to the rook on A1. So whose pawn is weaker, the A3 pawn for white or the C6 pawn for black?
Or will it just be a wash? Well, there is 15 extra seconds here for Sarah, and she's using them right here, trying to figure out what to do. She does play B4.
I think that was a great decision because even if it is a wash in terms of quantity of pawns, if my pawn on B4 can land on A3, oh, it's very clear that black is the one in the driver's seat. So knight takes C6, trading off the G4. Whoa. I was never expecting that one.
Queen E6 now, and now you move F6 is on tap. So she just played H3, and now Sarah can simply take that pawn.
And she wisely does it. Queen D6, but now knight D3 to C5. I would try to get that to happen very quickly because I need to recoup this pawn on A3. Good move H5, playing on both flanks. And, oh, quick trade there. The G4 pawn is hanging, but I think I'd rather give up the G4 pawn than see my opponent stay with an A3 pawn.
I know, but she did not agree with you. She did play, she did protect the G pawn. And now she's just trying to shuffle her queen around, asking black, how do you make progress?
I would think about going rook H8. I don't know if there's actually an attack over there, but rook H8 is tempting. She was queen E6 first.
Just like rook H8, and then you take the pawn, and then I'm going to play like queen F6 or something.
Yep. That looks great. Queen over to 8. There she does it. Here comes queen H4. And once queen H4 happens, you lose the G4 pawn. You're going to lose it with check. So here comes a very direct attack.
All right, so you win the pawn with check, but my king does run away. You play rook H2, king C1. I'm still on the run.
Queen G1. She found it.
Oh, and there it is. Second pawn.
She could have taken with the queen on F2 and won the rook for free. This is still should be winning for black, but not as easy because there are more pieces remaining.
Yeah, for sure. I had the same hallucination. I was like, you're right. Queen F2 would have just ended the game immediately.
And what's going on here? So there's got to be a checkmate against this king as well, in addition to being up to a couple pawns.
Oh, there we have it. Rook F2. Oh, and that just allows rook takes B2 and queen A1 mate. So Sarah with the first victory in the bullet match. Can Olga come back? Keep it tied.
I think these two have played some of the longest games that we've seen. The first game of the match, that 5 minute plus 1 second increment, was like 14 minutes long. And that bullet game was almost 4 minutes long. So they are playing very long, drawn out games here. And that's what happens between two relatively even players. So here in this position, it's early. Is Black going to be left with an isolated pawn? Like, is Black going to play c5 and White's going to play d4? No, knight to d4, going for knight f5.
By the way, good news for people who are hoping that Abdumalik would get on the board. She did not win a game, but she did avoid starting the match 0-10. She did get a draw, so it's 9.5-half.
And we've seen that happen with Alexander Kosteniuk beating Gunina Mamadzada 11-0 in the opening round of the first Grand Prix leg. So it happens. It just, when it's not a player's day, all goes wrong. And here, speaking of all going wrong, for Olga Giria, this open diagonal on the king's, like the king side position looks very weak because the bishop on b2 is so strong. Just, I don't like Black's position one bit.
Yeah, I agree. Knight f4 played. Hammering on that b5 pawn. Again, ahead on time is Sarah Kadim.
It's,
do we have to play knight e6?
The hanging pawn structure is very bad for Black. The bishop on b2 is the best piece on the board. The d5 pawn is pinned to the bishop on b7. Feels like Black is just stuck. You're like kind of in the mud here. And White can play anything. Queen c2, rook f to d1, maybe pawn h4, rook c2, good move. And go queen a1 if you'd like. I see a million different plans for White and very few for Black. Okay, we've seen these h pawns push. Something, and okay, so rook, queen a1, bishop f6, and then rook c5, even better.
Yeah, give up one advantage for another advantage. In this case, a strong bishop or just a free pawn.
Oh wait, she hung the rook on c5, so she gave it up. She could have taken the knight on e4 instead. Okay, well, this is Olga Giria's chance, right? When you get a game,
yeah, this is a game now. Yeah, so she's now got a pawn for the exchange,
right?
And some nice pieces. So it's not just a pawn. It's like White also has some really nice pieces. That bishop on g2 and that knight on f4 is gorgeous. We actually took off a second pawn.
Yeah, so I prefer to have, I would prefer to have White as well. And I think the time situation, is the clearest evidence of that. 8 seconds for Olga Giria. She needs to win this game. She needs to not lose. That's the most important thing. She's down 3 pawns and a bishop for a rook. Oh, and here comes the a pawn. It just got worse and worse and worse for Giria here. And a7 looks pretty good. Played. Oh, rook a8. Hold up. Was that a moment too soon?
So if bishop a8, you have rook takes d4, and the pawn on a7 will hang.
Oh my gosh! And rook a1 is rook d7. Rook d7, and now you're winning the a7 pawn. And that's a moment where you push too far. And now your pawn can't be protected. And now that's the chance Olga Giria needed. She needs to hold this game. Whoa. Which is...
Wait, she sacrificed her queen with this idea, bishop d5, that she's making a queen here.
Wow.
God. She's going to win this game. There's no perp. That was a fantastic idea. I looked at it last move and I saw that it didn't work. But apparently it worked the second go around. And Sarah Kateryna now with a 2-point lead. Well, it's going to be close, Robert. Olga would have to win this game and also have time on the clock to start another game.
Right.
She's going to have to win pretty quickly.
Yes, because there's just over 2 minutes left, which means she kind of has to make every move instantly now. She doesn't even have time to think, because if this game goes 60 moves, then the match is just about over. So she needs to win and win fast, and she's off to a great start in that department. She's a minute and 2 seconds on her clock. She understands what kind of pressure she's under.
Yeah, she's got the game plan, and I'm sure Sarah also understands that if she survives the clock, then she wins this match.
And part of the problem with a mindset thing here, Jennifer, is that for Black, like, oh, let me use as much time as possible. But now you're down 30 seconds, and with a minute and 30 seconds left in the overall match, if White keeps playing quickly and Black doesn't have time to compute what's going on, that could just actually result in a quick loss. So Olga Giria is doing this absolutely perfectly but she needs to win. I'm so nervous for her looking at the match clock, looking at the board, looking at the clock on the board. She's spending 10 seconds here or whatever that she can't afford to spend.
Yeah, we've got about a minute left on the clock now. And by the way, that combination that Sarah pulled off in last game, I want to look at that when this match is over.
Yeah, we certainly will, because that was fantastic. The ability to give up a queen to get a new one. And all right, how much time's left? 48 seconds. I don't think there's enough time for Olga Giria. She has to win this game, first of all. But even if she does win, I don't think there will be time remaining on the match clock.
I don't think so either. No, we're down to something like 30 seconds. And not only that, the white's not winning. I mean, there's no like checkmating attack or anything. It's still just a game. Maybe white's better, maybe even much better, but you're not winning in the next 20 seconds.
Yeah, even if you blundered your queen, you would just play until checkmate and just waste time, right? So now pieces are traded. Gear is in a think tank about how to recapture. Unfortunately for her, even if this position does look nice for white, she needs to win this game, and there's no more time remaining after that. So the time is officially up, I see here. So that means that Sara Kateryna wins the match. And, well, I think initially I went with her, then I changed my mind to Olga because of how well she defended in time trouble. But ultimately, Sara deserves the utmost respect for pulling out this match.
Yeah, some really nice games by Sara. And like I said, I can't wait to see that game where she turned it around after another turnaround from Olga. But let's check in now that this game is over. Well, I guess the game itself is not over, but the match is over. I am wondering to see if Abdumalik can win a game against Kateryna Lagno. This could be her only win of the match, Robert. But I think she's going to do it. I think she's going to get her one win. Because how do you stop those pawns?
Saving the best for last is what she's done here.
H5, G6. Yes, This is great. This is what we like to see. We do not like somebody to go away without 1 point. Except Kateryna would prefer just to... Wait a second. Okay, why not?
Knight G5 and then H6, H7.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, 94 check. Oh, missing the fork.
Oh, but okay. And then we can stick our knight on G7. That was her plan, and she just stuck to it. And H7, and now the knight blockades the bishop from stopping the pawn. And her only win of the match, but definitely a moral relief, right, Robert?
Yeah, to end on winning note, even though the match clearly wasn't hers for the taking, it was all Lagno in the match. But it does feel good to end on that right note, just with a win, and say, I'm going to forget about this because I just lost how many games? 10 games, and I only won 1. It feels bad, but I think Zhansaya will get over it. We will have to take a quick break because when we return, we will have Sara Kateryna to join the call here so we can interview her about what was an excellent match victory over Olga Giria. Stay where you are, everybody. You'll want to hear this conversation. We'll be back shortly. have brought Sarah onto the call. She has beaten Olga Giria in what was a very tight matchup. So first of all, congratulations, Sarah. You must be pretty relieved.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a tough game. I mean, it had so many ups and downs. So I'm glad finally I managed to win.
And well, Jennifer, I'll let you take the wheel here because we were fascinated by the position that we have on screen.
Oh, yeah.
It happened so fast, Sarah. And then all of a sudden you played Bishop takes 8. Tell us about this moment.
I know, but I think she could go Rook D1, right? I mean, I saw that it doesn't matter if I just, here she had Rook D1 and.
Right, Rook D1 check. So then if I move the king, you just take on A1 and you're winning.
Yeah, so I just have to take, but okay, I mean, I'm not losing this one, of course, but, and I would have been happy with a draw because I could win the match, but still. Yeah. It was crazy when, yeah, she had Rook D1 and she didn't go for it.
Well, yeah, I think she missed it. It was so little time left on the clock and she just played Queen C2 and you won easily after that. But yeah, a tremendous idea there. So Sarah, you actually started with 2 victories in this match.
And yeah, then I just blundered. I blundered a piece and I was like...
And you lost 3 in a row after that and you were actually trailing. So what did you feel at that moment and how did you come back from it?
I mean, it's blitz. Anything can happen, so I didn't do anything special, to be honest, to come back. But okay, I didn't take it too serious. I mean, I didn't take it too hard on myself to just feel upset about the blunder. But after that, I just came back, I guess.
Yeah, and it was really an amazing bounce back by you. And well, you mentioned something just now, so I want to pick your brain about it a little bit. You said that, oh, you would have been fine with a draw because you were up a point and there wasn't much time left in the match. How closely were you looking at the match clock versus looking at the board? Because it's hard to balance both those things, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just, I didn't even know the points. I just knew I had 1 point and I felt that it was almost over. I mean, the segment, because we played too many games. And I thought if I can keep that one, I can win the match. So I didn't really try to make it equal or something. I tried to play my game, but I knew that at that point, draw was of course much better than a loss, so that's why I decided to go for this one.
Yeah. And well, oh, sorry, go ahead, Jennifer.
Oh, we have this bracket in front of us now. I don't think it's on the program screen, but I'm just looking at it. And is there anyone that you're looking forward to playing later in the competition? Anyone who you think might be a favorite in the event?
Of course, I like to play with Hui Fan, but I mean, I love to, but now
no chance anymore.
no chance anymore. So that was my favorite to play with, and now I don't know. I really like to play with Valentina or Kateryna.
Well, I imagine you really want to play with them because that means you want to win your match and then play one of them.
Yeah, but I like all of them. There are so many good players here, and I don't have someone that I say I have better chances to play with because I think everybody's strong here. But I like to play them all. I mean, I'm looking forward to the matches, and I will try to play some interesting chess.
Yeah, Sarah, that's a great attitude. I really like the attitude that you immediately said you wanted to play against Ho Yifan because she's the strongest player. Because some competitive people want to play against somebody weaker, so they're more likely to win. But I just really love that attitude.
When I got into the elite chess, I mean women chess, Hui Fan was already inactive, so I didn't get the chance to play with her in many other tournaments, like the Grand Prix that we used to play. And that's why I'm so happy to see her back, and that's why I said I wanted to play with her, because before I didn't get the chance to play with her when I was playing some other tournaments. So
yeah, I think it's a very good outlook. And I want to ask you, because it does seem like you're taking this quite seriously and you're showing all the players the respect that, of course, that you and they all deserve. So what has your preparation been like for these matches? Because you're getting a single opponent, but there's so many games consecutively. Like, what does your preparation look like in advance of a match?
Actually, I must say I lost a bit of motivation after this coronavirus because we all stayed at home and we couldn't play so many tournaments. So to be honest, I didn't practice much before this one, but when I saw that I got invited to this tournament, and FIDE is doing a great job by organizing this kind of tournaments, also the chess websites, I can say. So when I saw that I was invited, I got my motivation back at some point. And for this match, I prepared a bit, but for the other match, I didn't.
How do you prepare for a speed chess championship? Are you just working on your openings, or also just sparring?
I'm working with Matthew Cornett, he's my coach. So I just, today in the morning, I talked to him. We decided for the openings and nothing more. We just decided what I want to do. And we checked a bit and then I just played it.
And so you don't adjust between the games. You're not like trying to look stuff up in the.
No, I don't. I don't do that much even during the tournaments. I'm not the type of player to prepare too much. I just try to stay, active and do some tactics or something. But I don't prepare too much also before the normal game, so I don't do it also here. But I just try to know what I want to do, and that's what I do.
Well, how about in during the match, right? You have these kind of 5 minute or so breaks. What happens if you played an opening where you feel like that didn't really go my way? How are you either like preparing and looking at the line, or are you mentally just adjusting yourself because you do not have that much time? Whereas in a classical tournament, you have a full day to rest and recover. So what is kind of that like for you?
It happened. I felt like I went wrong in the opening at some point, but I just asked my coach. And that was it. I didn't check anything. He just told me the idea and I adjusted it for the next match.
That's pretty good way to fix your openings. Well, Sarah,
you mentioned, sorry, just one more question. Sarah, you mentioned in regular tournaments, you often don't prepare that much either. Is that because you have like other things that you like to do before the game, or just like sports? Like what kind of things do you do instead of, spending hours looking at the chess base?
Yeah, I don't know. At some point, I don't have a really good memory, and when I try to prepare a lot, I don't remember it either. So I just try to relax and be in shape and not put too much pressure on myself before the game, so that I have enough energy for the games. And I mean, I'm not that type to just look at the files and remember everything and go for it. So I just try to play chess, and that's what I do for the normal.
Well, sounds really smart.
Yeah, it's clearly working in your favor. So we definitely want to thank you for joining us here for this interview, and we wish you the best of luck tomorrow as you play on Gunina.
The thing that you're doing is really great. I really keep watching it, and I really enjoy it. I think it's great what you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much. We certainly enjoy what you're doing here, and congratulations once more.
Thank you.
Good luck tomorrow.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, we pull up the bracket here and we see that Sara moves on to face Anna Ushanina there on the right side of the bracket for us. And then on the other side, we have an all-Russian matchup between Kateryna Lagno and Valentina Gunina. So Jennifer, I think these are two really tough matches to call in the semifinals because Anna Ushanina just beat the highest rated female player in the world. And then we have Sara, who just impressed against Olga Giria down the stretch. So, and the other side of the Russian players, you have Valentina Gunina, who can beat anybody on any given day. And you have Lagno, who just demolished Zhansaya Abdumalik. So what are your choices here?
They're really tough. I think that you can't argue with beating Hou Yifan. And by the way, Hou Yifan played really well today, but Anna just played even a little bit better, Ushanina. So incredible performance. I got to give her the edge just because of that. But Sara just has such a tremendous attitude. That is the attitude of a world champion, Robert. Somebody who's like, hey, who's the best player in this tournament? I want to play them. Just got to love that. The other one, I don't know. It's so close, Robert. I don't know who to pick. They're both so good.
I mean, I've learned again about picking against Gunina. She went all the way to the finals of the last one. And by the way, both Gunina and Ushanina are in excellent shape as we think about the overall Grand Prix standings and things like that. They were the finalists last time. Ushanina won, and Gunina made it to the final. And so they can really put themselves in prime positioning here with a victory and heading into the finals. But it's going to be tough. I'm going to go with Lagno. I think she's learned her lessons from the first leg, and she's playing so well. She just, did an excellent match against Zhansaya. And I'm gonna go with Sara. I have faith in we just talked to her. She seemed like confident, but also extremely respectful of her opponents. So she has faith in her own abilities while still understanding that her opponents are some of the most challenging on the planet. And I just really liked her attitude. So there's going to be a bit of
I guess, just conversational bias that we just spoke to her. But I really like the way she framed it, and so I'll go with her, even though Anna Ushanina has looked unstoppable this far.
Yeah, you read my mind, Robert, because she was so sweet and just like so insightful. I checked to see like if she was still on the line before I made my prediction. So such a great attitude, but I don't know. Beating Hou Yifan, I got to go with Anna, and I'm going to disagree with you in the other matchup as well, and go for Valentina, the incredible attacker. But I think that match is just so close. They're both such incredible players, and we're going to be lucky to see that match.
For sure. And we'll remind everybody that it's tomorrow, same time, same place. But I have an admission to make to everybody, some breaking news. Jennifer, I will not be joining you for the call tomorrow. I am taking the weekend off. I know it's shocking because I've been covering this event from the very beginning. It just had to happen. So I actually don't know who's joining you tomorrow, but I'm sure they will be better than I am. So I'm sorry to.
God, no. Robert, you were just wonderful to work with, and I will miss you, but I'm sure that we'll have an incredible replacement. Robert, what are you going to be doing with your time off? Going to, just be relaxing, or any special plans?
Yeah, I'm just so obviously taking the necessary precautions because I take social distancing very seriously during COVID, and I want to stress that. But I'm going to be seeing some friends socially distant wise, and so it's the weekend. They have time off from work, so I'll be doing that. But I've been commenting every single match thus far, and I will down the stretch as well. But just sometimes you take a little break and give other people a chance to shine. So they'll be better than I am. So don't be sad, chat. And Jennifer, I'm sorry to break this news on you, spring it on you here, but I've had nothing but the best time commentating with you. It's so much fun.
Yeah, it's been really fun, and the chat is crying. Like, they're so sad. But it's good that you told them so that they could thank you for all the work you've done so far and brace themselves for a Hessless chess match. That's just a C, Robert.
And a C is a passing grade, so we can all be happy. But thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We are signing off for the day. It was a really fun, another round of the Women's Speeches Championship brought to you by FIDE and Chess.com. And enjoy yourselves and enjoy more chess tomorrow with the one and only Jennifer Shahade.
Yes, I'll be here, and I can't wait to see how these matches go down. Enjoy your time off, Robert, and thank you everybody for watching, and to the players for just giving us such tremendous entertainment today.
Thanks, everyone.